Chapter 1594. Although he was running away, Mu Bin's five senses were still there. When he felt a strong wind coming from behind him, he instinctively shrank his neck. Then he leaned sideways and grabbed the knife in his hand. Then, he turned around and slashed. Yang Qindong retracted his arm and dodged the fatal knife. He thought to himself, that was close. He had also become careless and began to pay more attention to Mu Bin. Since he could become the king of Shiping by the Southern Ming Emperor, he was obviously not an ordinary person. He could only blame everything for going too smoothly, which made Yang Qindong lose his vigilance. Fortunately, his agility saved him. No matter what, his opponent did not hurt him. Yang Qindong, who was no longer careless, was even more terrifying once he got serious. When he stretched out his left hand again, Yang Qindong moved faster and grabbed at Mu Bin for the second time. Save me! Mu Bin suddenly felt a sense of danger when he missed his target. The knife just now seemed to be a hasty attack, but in fact, he had been planning for a long time. He wanted to counterattack when someone suddenly attacked him. He had been training a lot, and his results were very good. However, such a sure-win knife did not work. He knew that Yang Qindong was difficult to deal with. Now, seeing that he was closing in on him again, other than continuously waving his blade, he was also shouting loudly. King of Shiping was indeed the king of Shiping, especially a king like him who had been guarding the territory. He had been practicing martial arts since he was young, so he was quite skilled. Yang Qindong did not manage to catch him twice. He only managed to grab the saber at his waist and forcefully snatched it away. And it was at this time that several Mu family's bodyguards appeared in the surroundings. They were all veterans who had followed Mu Bin for hundreds of years, and each of them had extraordinary skills. Although they could not exert 100% of their strength because of the smoke bombs, they still rushed over when they heard the commotion. One by one, they rushed toward Yang Qindong desperately, just to give their king a chance to escape. Scram! Yang Qindong shouted. He swung the heavy machine gun as if it was an iron rod. This was also because everyone was too close to each other, so shooting was limited. But even if he doesn't use firearms, Yang Qindong is a grandmaster. Why would he be afraid of a few Mu family soldiers? The heavy machine gun abruptly turned into an iron rod and accurately smashed under the Mu family's bodyguards who were rushing over. One by one, they were sent flying back in the same way they had rushed over. They screamed miserably as they were sent flying. Yang Qindong took an elegant step, still approaching Mu Bin step by step. Even though there were a few bodyguards blocking the way, the distance between the two sides was less than 10 steps. At such a distance, Yang Qindong was still confident that he could capture Mu Bin alive. It was like a cat catching a mouse. One was chasing and the other was escaping. The distance between the two sides was quickly closing. Perhaps sensing that he couldn't run away, Mu Bin turned around fiercely and shouted, "I'm going to fight you to the death." Then, he bumped into Yang Qindong. He still underestimated Yang Qindong. His five senses were already extraordinary. As soon as Mu Bin turned around, Yang Qindong sensed it. Before Mu Bin rushed over, he turned his body to the side. Then he stretched out his right foot and gently hooked it, hitting Mu Bin's leg. With a thud, Shiping King fell to the ground. He quickly moved forward and stretched out his right foot as fast as he could, stepping on Mu Bin's back. With a little force, Mu Bin could not get up. Then, Yang Qindong fired again with the heavy machine gun. More than a dozen Mu family soldiers who had just reacted and wanted to get closer fell. Gunshots rang out, and Shiping King was also stepped on. Yang Qindong easily obtained victory by fighting against hundreds of people by himself. Shiping King's capture put a lot of pressure on the others. At this moment, they wanted to make a move, but they had some scruples. However, if they did not make a move, they did not know what to do. They were all stunned on the spot. Let go of Shiping King. He is a king personally appointed by the Southern Ming Emperor. Are you trying to rebel? Seeing that they could not make a move, the head of the Li family, Li Jiarin, took the initiative to step forward. He stood on the moral high ground and criticized Yang Qindong, criticizing him. Son of a bitch. Yang Qindong did not even look at him. He gently hooked his right finger, and several bullets flew out from the muzzle. Each bullet hit Li Jiarin's body, leaving several bright red spots of blood. His body swayed again and again. Finally, Li Jiarin's arm swayed a few times in the air. Then he fell to the ground with a thud, dead. The head of the Li family, one of the three major families in Yunnan Prefecture, was shot to death just like that. This scene shocked the others. They stood still and did not dare to move. That was the head of the Li family. In the eyes of many civilians and soldiers, he was definitely a high and mighty figure. But now, he was killed just because of a disagreement. Compared to that, they were nothing. After killing Li Jiayin, the others became well-behaved. Yang Qindong could finally breathe a sigh of relief. Yang Qindong was also a little tired after the massacre. After all, he was a human, not a god. Plus, with such heavy equipment on him, ordinary people would not be able to stand just running back and forth. Fortunately, he had a stronger physique than the others. Not long after, shouts came from behind him. Kill! Charge in and save the sixth young master. Following these shouts, a group of black cavalry rushed out from the main entrance. They were led by Ba Daojiang. Everyone's eyes were red, and each of them carried firearms. They looked like they had just walked out of a mountain of corpses and a sea of fire. Ba Daojiang only found out later that Yang Qindong was gone. Originally, he thought that he had gone to the telecommunications room. It was only when Director Wang Shan came to ask for instructions with a telegram from Yao Jun that Beta Persei found out that the young master was gone. There was no need for Ba Daojiang to explain what it meant for someone to disappear at this time. Ba Daojiang could imagine it. Previously, Yang Qindong had broken out alone and attracted the attention of the assassins. After that incident, Ba Daojiang blamed himself, thinking that he had not done his duty. Now that Yang Qindong had disappeared, one could imagine how anxious he was. After leaving the side entrance to Dao Shao and the back entrance to the other black cavalry, Ba Daojiang led hundreds of black cavalry to break out from the main entrance. Along the way, all he saw were the corpses of his enemies. He could imagine who had done it, so he was even more anxious. After all, Yang Qindong was only one person. If he discovered something unexpected, there would be no one to inform him. The more he thought about it, the more anxious he became. Ba Daojiang and the others charged faster and faster. Finally, they appeared at the main entrance and finally saw Yang Qindong. When they saw that the young master was safe and sound and that there was a person under his feet and that there were corpses all over the ground in front of the young master, Ba Daojiang heaved a sigh of relief. Then, he led the black cavalry straight to Yang Qindong. The black cavalry also charged out. Seeing that there was no chance to attack Yang Qindong, the other Mu family soldiers at the main entrance wanted to escape. However, at this moment, gunshots rang out again. This time, they did not hit their bodies. Instead, they hit the air. If you don't want to die, stay where you are. Otherwise, the gun doesn't have eyes. They had already seen the power of the firearms. Who would dare to escape? Previously, they had taken action because there was a glimmer of hope. Now that even their last hope was gone, everyone had lost their will to resist. All they wanted was to save their lives. When everyone stopped moving, the black cavalry held them down one by one and tied them together one by one. The overall situation was now settled. The shouts just now were getting closer and closer. Soon, Beta Persei took the lead and appeared in front of Yang Qindong. When he saw the scene in front of him, Beta Persei involuntarily knelt on the ground. His eyes were full of joy. After Shiping King led 10,000 troops into the city through the East City Gate and headed towards the Three Provinces Palace, Beta Persei was like a mad dog. He led 10,000 people and rushed towards the Three Provinces Palace. During this period, he also encountered people from the three great clans and the Mu family's army. However, Beta Persei bravely rushed forward as if he did not care about his life. Anyone who blocked his way was either killed or seriously injured. But even so, he was still anxious. Although he was full of confidence in Yang Qindong, he was still afraid of what might happen. After finally rushing over and seeing that Yang Qindong was fine, Beta Persei felt exhaustion fill his body. He knelt on the ground with a plop. Go, help Beta Persei up. Seeing that this was caused by physical exhaustion, Yang Qindong hurriedly said to Badaojiang. Then he lifted his foot and let the other black cavalry come forward and hold down Shiping King Mubin. While removing the heavy machine from his body, Yang Qindong walked in front of Beta Persei and asked, "How's the situation outside?" After taking a few deep breaths, Beta Persei recovered some of his physical strength. He hurriedly got up and replied, "There's no big problem outside. Jianghu and the others are watching over there. They can't rush in. The battle to defend the city was not the key now. The Mu family's army had diverted some of their forces to block the reinforcements. Shiping King had also personally rushed into the city. It seemed that the so-called siege was just a way to lure the tiger away from the mountain. Previously, when they had sufficient forces, they could not take down Yunnan Prefecture. Now that the forces were scattered, it was even more impossible to take down the city. Yang Qindong nodded after hearing this. At this time, Wang Shan ran out of the mansion and delivered the telegram sent by Yao Yingjun. Tell Yao Yingjun to just defend and wait for reinforcements. He just needs to keep an eye on the people who set up the ambush and don't let them escape. Since Shiping King had been captured, Yang Qindong no longer had anything to worry about. He also knew that his opponent had used up all of his tricks. Even so, it did not matter whether the reinforcements arrived earlier or later. The calmer Yang Qindong's tone was, the better everyone's expression became. Since the sixth young master said that it would be fine, it must be fine. Chapter 1595. Yunnan Manor was truly Yang Qindong's blessed land. He had only stayed here for a few days, but he had already captured the king of 3 provinces, Zhu Huihua. Now, even the king of Shiping, Mu Bin, was also captured. One must know that it would be very difficult to capture these 2 kings if they were to go to war. Even if the enemy was crippled, they might not be able to capture these 2 kings. It had to be said that Yang Qindong was very successful as bait. With the capture of the king of Shiping, good news came one after another. Yang San, Tai Hu, and the others appeared one by one. They did not come empty-handed. They cooperated with Captain Dao Xiao to eliminate the Mu army that was attacking the side and back doors of the Wang mansion. They also captured some captives, such as Qin Ningkong and Wang Shufu, the Qin family's patriarch of the 3 great families of Yunnan Manor. They were also among the captives. With these people arrested, the Southern Cloud Manor finally calmed down. After learning that the fastest reinforcements would arrive at Yunnan Manor at night, Yang Qindong said to everyone, "It's time. Everyone, get ready to counterattack." It was time to counterattack. All the generals had excited expressions on their faces. These days, although their achievements were not small, if one looked carefully, they had always been passively taking a beating. They always had to wait for the other party to make the first move before they could react. This was not a good feeling, and it made everyone who was used to taking the initiative to attack very uncomfortable. Fortunately, this difficult time was about to pass. The main force of the 5-star army was about to arrive, and they could finally launch a counterattack without any scruples. Yunnan Manor began to get busy. Yang Qinjiang led Beta Persei, Yang San, Tai Hu, and the others to begin to formulate a counterattack plan. Outside the city, Lufji, who was still attacking the city, did not know what was happening inside the city. The West Gate, which was originally captured by the Mu army, had long been recaptured by the 5-star army. At this point, the news outside the city was completely cut off. Ravji was still leading his troops to attack the city. In order to protect Shiping King who was in the city, the forces attacking the city were very aggressive. In just 4 hours, they had launched several attacks and lost more than 8,000 generals. In addition, there were also countless casualties. Seeing that there were only about 10,000 soldiers left, Ravji's expression turned ugly. He looked at Wu Ying-tu and asked, "General Wu, do you have any ideas?" "My ass!" Wu Ying-tu, who was in a very bad mood, said angrily. Even though he was the Miao King, Wu Ying-tu had not been doing well all these years. Firstly, there were too few Miao people, especially the young ones. Unlike the Han people, where a new batch would be born very quickly after the first batch was killed, the Miao people had a very small population, so their growth cycle was naturally very long. In order to fight for more benefits for the Miao people, Wu Ying-tu had brought all the young people in the tribe out, all for the sake of fighting for more benefits. This was the last of his strength in the Miao people. However, in this battle, 70% of his 10,000 brave Miao soldiers died. Now, there were only 3,000 Miao people left, and more than 1,000 of them were injured. This result made him very depressed. So what if they won this battle? With this small number of people, when they split the benefits later, what he would get would be next to nothing. The drastic reduction in strength made Miao Ying-tu very unhappy. When he heard Rajiv ask him, it would be strange if he had a good attitude. Rajiv had no other choice. He had only asked, but he did not expect to hear such an answer. His expression was very ugly, alternating between red and white. In the end, he did not say anything and left. At this moment, in Rajiv's eyes, Miaowing too had already formed a concept. That was, a person who was not worth his time. Men, get on a horse and contact young Master Mu. Ask for instructions on what to do next. Also stop the siege for now. Rajiv was able to get to where he was today because he was a man with brains. After continuously attacking the city for more than 4 hours, not only did he fail to take down the city, he also suffered heavy losses. More importantly, he only had about 10,000 soldiers left. This made him have no choice but to consider his next step carefully. He even suspected that King Shiping did this on purpose, so that he could use the war to deplete his strength. If it was in the past, Rajiv would not be so anxious. He had the kingdom of Bangla as his backer. Without a source of soldiers, he could just recruit new ones. After a period of training, there would be an army that could fight. But now, even the king had surrendered. He no longer had a backer and a source of soldiers. In such a situation, every death meant one less person. He didn't know when he would be able to replenish his men. He had no choice but to think about it carefully. Also, why was there no movement in the city after more than 4 hours? Didn't King Shiping already arrange everything? Then what was all this about? He desperately wanted to know, so he arranged for someone to ask Mu Kong. Rajiv was not the only one who did not know that King Shiping had been captured by Yang Chendong. Even Mu Tsong did not know. At this moment, he was still in the forest, waiting for Yao Ingjun to appear. However, after the death of Jiang Wuqing and 5,000 cavalrymen, Yao Ingjun was clearly afraid and did not move forward. This was good too. Mu Tsong was also happy to have some peace. He was waiting for good news from Yunnan Manor. He was full of confidence in his father. What? Rajiv asked what to do next. What else can we do? Of course, we have to continue the siege. Tell him that the timing is not right, so my father did not make a move. That's why he has to go all out. If we don't attract the attention of the defenders, how can my father carry out his plan? Mu Tsong was resting against a tree when he was disturbed by the people sent by Lavajai. He immediately spoke with disdain. The men returned resentfully. When these words reached Rajiv's ears, he was stupefied. Then, he reflected on himself. Could it be that the siege was not successful, and King Shiping did not see the right opportunity to make a move? If that was the case, he would have to work hard to continue the siege. Rajiv made a decision, or rather, he could only obey his decision. He went to find Wu Yingtu again to discuss the siege. Unfortunately, he was directly rejected this time. He was so angry that he cursed as soon as he left the tent. Wu Yingtu, this general will definitely tell young Master Mu about what you did. Don't think about fighting for something good in the future. Humph. After the angry Rajiv returned to the main camp, he gathered 10,000 soldiers under his command and launched another fierce attack on Yunnan Manor's West Gate Tower. Compared to before, this attack was more ferocious. It was obvious that he wanted to use the army to suppress the city and create enough conditions for King Shiping to make a move. Rajiv, who thought he was doing the right thing, did not know that the 5-star army's real reinforcements were less than 10 li away from Yunnan Manor's south. The first reinforcements were known as the King of Cavalry, the world's first cavalry army. After receiving Yang Chendong's telegram, each soldier was equipped with 4 horses and galloped out of Mount Liang under the lead of Army Commander Tian Hu. Along the way, they did not enter the city but took a detour. When the black mass of cavalry passed by, the soldiers of the 3 provinces in each city closed their doors and did not come out. The might of this cavalry was so fierce that it gave people a feeling of invincibility from afar. It was already fortunate that they didn't attack their cities. Who would take the initiative to find trouble with them? Because there was no one to stop them, the world's first cavalry army moved faster and faster. Finally, after each of the riders had almost run 2 horses to death, they saw Yunnan Manor in the distance. At this time, Hu Helu, the commander of the army guards, came to Tian Hu with an urgent telegram. General, the 6th young master sent an urgent message. Stop. After stopping the horses, Tian Hu ordered the army to stop and rest for a quarter of an hour. Using this opportunity, the other commanders came to him to discuss the next step of the battle. When the telegram was opened, It contained Yang Chendong's latest instructions. After reading it carefully, Tianhu laughed and said, "The sixth young master is indeed the sixth young master. Without us having to do anything, he has already captured the 3 provincial kings and the king of Shiping." Ha! That's true. Although they are all kings, how can they be a match for the sixth young master? The other commanders also laughed after hearing this. During the past few days of rushing, it was impossible for them not to be anxious. They were especially worried about the safety of the sixth young master. Their past experience told them that the sixth young master was very powerful and would be fine. However, they only had 500 black cavalry with them, and Yunnan Manor was the base camp of the 3 provincial kings. Anything could happen in the enemy's camp. If something happened to the sixth young master, the 5 commanders did not dare to imagine what would happen next. Before the sixth young master left, he had already decided that the eldest crown prince, Yangbo, would take over his position. However, could a 10-year-old child really lead them? What if someone was not convinced? After all, the Xianxia was too big. It was so big that no country, force or ethnic group could compare with it since ancient times. Would anyone have the confidence to let a 10-year-old child manage such a big country? At that time, it was possible that the huge Yang family would fall apart in an instant. If that was the case, where should they go from here? Even if they obeyed the young master's orders, they would have to fight with their former colleagues. In that case, the only thing that would be lost was the strength of the Xianxia. If that was the case, it would be very difficult for the Xianxia to develop in the future. In short, if something happened to Yang Chendong now, the consequences would be unimaginable. In order to avoid such a situation, they could only rush with all their might. At the same time, they prayed that the sixth young master would be fine. Chapter 1596. Now that they had received the latest telegram from Yang Chendong, they could finally breathe a sigh of relief. While they breathed a sigh of relief, they began to think about how to make a contribution. More importantly, they were thinking about how to deal with those who wanted to go against the sixth young master. All right, everyone has read the contents of the telegram. Since that's the case, I've decided to split into 2 groups. The world's first cavalry army was less than 10 miles away, but Rajiv had no idea about that. Although he had heard about the arrival of the 5-star army's main force from some sources, in his opinion, the reinforcements would not arrive so easily. They would have to pass through many cities in the 3 provinces to reach southern Cloud Prefecture from Liang Mountain. Therefore, he did not think that other than Yao Yingjuan's reinforcements, Bugnam of Gojoseon would arrive in such a short time. Now, he was wholeheartedly sending troops to attack the city. The attack was not going well. It was even a little tragic. Rajiv did not know that Shiping King had been captured. The surrendered soldiers and civilians in the city knew about it, so they could focus on defending the city without worrying about other changes. This boosted the morale of the soldiers defending the city. With the advantage of numbers, the counterattack was fierce. Rajiv was destined to meet a tough opponent. His excessive trust in Shiping King had also doomed Rajiv to a tragedy. Seeing that the soldiers attacking the city had suffered heavy losses, and soon, more than half of the 10,000 soldiers were killed, he still had no intention of stopping the attack. At this moment, he was like a gambler, putting all his treasures on the line, hoping for a miracle to happen. Would a miracle happen? Of course it was impossible. Not only did Shiping King not show up, but a mighty cavalry team came from afar. They were wearing light green military uniforms and black armor. Each of them had 2 horses. While they were still far away, the battle cries could be heard. Is Shiping King here? The excited Rajiv raised his eyes and looked. He was very excited. No one answered him because the others did not know how King Shiping's army was dressed. However, someone in the crowd recognized him. He was King Miao Wuing too. In the past, when he followed Zhu Huichen, he had dealt with the Mu family army. Naturally, he knew what the other party was like. Let's not talk about whether or not they had that many cavalry troops. Just from their appearance alone, they didn't look like one at all. Instead, they looked like the legendary 5-star army's cavalry. It had long been rumored that the regular 5-star army wore military green uniforms. This was very different from the military uniforms that were either black, gray, or even yellow. Because of this, Wu Yingto's expression changed drastically. Not to mention, Wu Ying too had once fought with the 5-star army, but he had been defeated and fled. Could it be that the reinforcements from the 5-star army have really arrived? But how could they be so fast? Doubts arose in his heart, but he quickly suppressed them because he knew that this was not the time to be conflicted. It was the time to make a choice. If the reinforcements from the 5-star army really came, then they would not be a match for the enemy with their current strength. In fact, when the infantry faced the cavalry, the idea of survival instantly occupied the highest point. Then, his gaze fell on Rajiv. Perhaps his only chance of survival depended on this person. Wu Ying too was already having second thoughts. Rajiv did not know about this at all. He was still looking forward to the cavalry's arrival. Surround him. It's this Rajiv. He overestimated himself and wants to become an enemy of Bugnam of Gojoseon. Men, capture him. Kill anyone who resists. Since he had decided to live, Wu Ying too did not care about whether he was a comrade or not. He only knew that if he captured this person and presented him to the 5-star army, there might be a way to survive. Wu Ying too led 3,000 Miao soldiers and suddenly attacked, catching Rajiv off guard. Seeing that many of his soldiers were killed by the Miao soldiers, he was furious. He roared loudly, "Wu Ying too, are you trying to rebel? Can't you see that the king of Shiping is already here with his cavalry? What are you trying to do? Ha ha ha. Open your dog eyes and see clearly. How is that king of Shiping's cavalry? It's clearly the reinforcements from the 5-star army. Even now, do you still place your hopes on Mu Bin? Can't you see that he's trying to weaken our strength? It's hateful that you're so badly injured, but you still don't understand. I really don't know how you survived all these years." Facing Rajiv's questioning, Wu Ying too was not afraid at all. Instead, he shouted and questioned Rajiv. Rajiv didn't care about making use of them anymore. He was more concerned about who the cavalry belonged to. When he heard Wu Ying too say that it was the reinforcements from the 5-star army, his expression changed greatly. At this moment, he did not want to be entangled with Wu Ying too and the Miao soldiers. He only wanted to escape as soon as possible. Escaping was more important. You still want to leave? Do you think you can leave? He knew that if he did not capture Rajiv, once the 5-star army caught up, he would not have a good ending. So how could he give up on his only hope of survival? Everyone, kill. Capture Rajiv alive and present him to the 5-star army. There will be a great reward. With a loud shout, Wu Ying too took the lead and rushed forward with his ghost head blade. With a few slashes, he cut down several soldiers and got closer and closer to Rajiv. You're courting death. Seeing his soldiers being cut down one by one, Rajiv became anxious. He knew that if he did not kill Wu Ying too, he would not be able to escape. He simply rushed over with his spear. Before the world's first cavalry army's 4th and 5th divisions arrived, the battle had already turned into a mess. The 4th Division Commander Su Da and the 5th Division Commander Yu Zhong glanced at each other. They didn't have any intention of taking action. They just ordered the cavalry to surround the scene. In short, they couldn't let the enemy who wanted to deal with the 6th young master escape. The battle in the field was still ongoing. Because of the number of soldiers and the premeditated plan, the Miao army gradually gained the upper hand. At this time, Wu Ying too was leading 6 of his soldiers to surround Rajiv. As expected of the great general of Banka, Rajiv's personal strength was not bad. In just a short while, no less than 6 or 7 Miao soldiers had died under his spear. However, even a tiger could not withstand a pack of wolves. After a long battle, Rajiv finally felt that his strength was running out. It was also at this time that Miao Ying To's ghost head blade arrived and landed on the body of the spear. Under the powerful force, the spear flew out of Rajiv's hand. Without a weapon, Rajiv could only dodge left and right without any ability to counterattack. If he kept defending, he would definitely lose. After a few more rounds, Rajiv was careless and his left arm was chopped off. He immediately let out a blood-curdling scream as he lost his balance and fell to the ground. Then, a few Miao soldiers rushed over and pinned him to the ground, tying him up tightly. Rajiv was captured. Seeing that the situation was over, the soldiers under his command abandoned their weapons and surrendered. At this point, the situation was settled. Wu Ying too quickly tidied up his clothes and came in front of the 2 division commanders Su Da and Yu Zhong who were riding in front of the army. After a long bow, he opened his mouth and said, "I am Wu Ying too, the commander of the Miao army. Because I went astray, I became an accomplice of the 3 provincial kings. Now that I have turned over a new leaf, I am willing to surrender to Bugnam of Gojoseon. I have specially captured the great general of Banka, Rajiv, to show my sincerity. I hope the general can give me a way out. Thank you. Suda and Yuzhong looked at each other after hearing this, then nodded and said, General Wu, we will remember what you have done, but now we still have to tie you up. As for how to deal with you, it will ultimately be decided by Bugnam of Gojoseon. Do you agree? I agree. Wu Ying too gritted his teeth and said helplessly. He didn't know what his future would be like. Now he could only hope that Yang Chindong would remember his contributions and not kill him. Under the city walls of Yunnan Prefecture, the chaotic battle ended dramatically. Without waiting for the world's first cavalry army to make a move, tens of thousands of enemy troops had all surrendered. This made the surrendered soldiers and the people in the city cheered. Beta Persei, who was standing on the city tower, also waved his hand with joy and said, Come on, open the city gate and welcome the army into the city. In the dense forest, Mu Tsong was still sleeping comfortably against a tree. In his dream, he saw his father capturing Yang Chindong and making a great contribution. This was where Mu Tsong's confidence in his father came from. After all, the Mu family had been operating in Yunnan Prefecture for a long time. In addition, they suddenly appeared and attacked. How could Bugnam of Gojoseon, who had just arrived for a few days, contend against them? As his son, he only needed to wait for Yunnan Prefecture to be taken down by his father. Then he would return with the army. At that time, they would immediately contact the Southern Ming Army. With the support of the Southern Ming Army, how could a leaderless 5-star army be a match? In his dream, Mu Tsong was already overjoyed. He even saw the Southern Ming Empire's reinforcements coming. It was a mighty and majestic cavalry. Their arrival caused the earth to tremble. It was truly awe-inspiring. Crown Prince, this is bad. Another cavalry unit is coming. Just when Mu Tsong was still dreaming, he suddenly heard such a voice. Then his shoulder was shaken and he became completely awake. What's going on? When he opened his eyes and saw General Azad shaking him, Mu Tsong still had a sleepy expression. Prince, a large number of cavalry suddenly appeared behind us. Cavalry? Are the Southern Ming Army's reinforcements here? Mu Tsong was still in a dream and couldn't extricate himself. No, they are using the banner of the 5-star army. Azad's face was pale and his body was trembling. What? 5-star army? That's impossible. Mu Tsong's first thought was disbelief. Then he kept shaking his head. Behind them was Yunnan Prefecture. His father should have taken it down by now. Then how could there be 5-star army's reinforcements coming from this direction? Chapter 1597. Regardless of whether he believed it or not, the truth was the truth. Behind them, there was indeed a large number of 5-star army cavalry rushing over, causing an earthquake on the ground. At the north side of the forest, Yao Ying-jun also rushed over with 15,000 infantrymen. They split into 2 sides and blocked off the forest. How is this possible? Mu Tsong's mouth was so wide open that a fist could be stuffed inside. His expression became somewhat sinister at this moment. The arrival of the 5-star army cavalry was from the direction of Yunnan Manor. Did that mean that Yunnan Manor was also completely under their control? If that was the case, where was his royal father? Why didn't anyone inform him when such a big thing happened? Mu Tsong couldn't figure it out, but it wasn't a matter of whether he wanted to or not. The 5-star army had already launched their attack. Facing enemies in the forest, they had a way to attack. For example, the simplest fire attack. Countless arrows fell like rain into the dense forest, and a raging fire began to burn. The Mu family troops who were hiding in the forest became even more chaotic. The soldiers were full of confidence before because the 5-star army was finished and even Bugnam of Gojoseon might be captured. But now, the appearance of the 5-star army's cavalry dispelled their thoughts and made them feel that their lives were in danger. The arrows fell and ignited the forest. The Mu family troops who had nowhere else to go could only charge out and fight to their deaths. Fight to the death. The 2 generals, Azad and Hak, decisively made a decision. They had fled all the way here. Now that they didn't even have a country, they didn't have much hope for the future. Now that they could die for a noble cause, they might as well fight to the death. But the two didn't notice that when they led their troops to attack, the savior in their eyes, young Master Mu Tsong, disappeared. On the official road, the forest on both sides was set ablaze. More and more Mu family troops rushed out from both sides of the road. Azad and Huck rushed out from the east side of the forest, while Luo Guan led his army and rushed out from the west side of the road. When the two armies joined together, there were nearly 20,000 men and horses charging towards the five-star army's cavalry. They didn't choose to attack Yao Yingjuan's troops because they didn't want to expose their backs to the cavalry. This would only accelerate their defeat. However, was it really a good choice to target the world's #1 cavalry army? Haha, it's good that you've come. I'm leaving. 1st Division Commander Tai Mu had always been a valiant warrior who loved to lead the charge. When he saw the enemy charging at him, how could he be courteous? He immediately squeezed his horse's belly with his legs and led his 10,000 soldiers to charge forward. The first merit belongs to our 2nd Division. 2nd Division Lu Duo was unwilling to fall behind and rushed out. 3rd Division Commander Hu Bo also wasn't going to sit back and watch. He wanted to rush out as well, but Commander Tian who came in front of him. 3rd Division Commander, they are enough. Your division is in charge of guarding. Remember, no one is allowed to escape. If they want to make an enemy out of the 6th young master, they will have to pay the heaviest price. Although he was a bit unwilling, a military order was absolute. After Hu Bo agreed, he spread out the 10,000 cavalry soldiers of the 3 divisions and completely surrounded the 2 forests. No one was allowed to escape. Using infantry against cavalry was like using scissors while the other side used rocks. The result was mostly predetermined. There were also powerful infantry that could fight evenly with cavalry. However, infantry usually had the advantage of terrain and numbers, or they were proficient in battle formations and had more powerful weapons. Clearly, the Mu clan army didn't have the advantage. Therefore, when they had the same number of troops, using infantry against cavalry was no different from seeking death. Not to mention the world's #1 cavalry army. Even if it was an ordinary cavalry, victory would be assured against 20,000 infantry. Moreover, the ones fighting were Tai Mu and the others. There was no possibility of failure. The result was that the moment the two sides met, before they even started fighting, under a dense rain of arrows, the Mu clan army at the front fell one after another. When the cavalry charged into the midst of the infantry, heads flew all over the ground. One by one, the Mu clan infantry were cut down, blood spilling everywhere. This was a battle where the strength was completely unequal. The infantry didn't have any formation to speak of. They were completely relying on brute force to attack. Facing the world's #1 cavalry army's cavalry, they were only sending themselves to their deaths. The cavalry quickly passed through the Mu clan infantry. A quarter of the 20,000 men were gone. Then, there was a recoil, division, and countless arrow formations formed, constantly killing. The ground was covered with more and more Mu clan soldiers' corpses. By the time Yao Yingjun arrived at the battlefield with his army, all he saw were broken limbs, blood splattered all over the ground, and heads rolling down. General Yao, I'll leave the task of cleaning up the battlefield to you, he. Riding on his horse, Commander Tai Mu showed Yao Yingjun his row of white teeth, then urged his horse to leave with the army. The world's #1 cavalry army had their own pride. As long as there were infantry, they would never interfere with work like cleaning up the battlefield. Yao Yingjun cupped his fists and thanked Tai Mu as he watched the cavalry leave. It must be known that although cleaning up the battlefield was tiring, there were many benefits. Not only could they get a share of the military merits, but they could also get all the good things from the enemy corpses. Just this point alone was enough to make many people envious. It only took them more than 2 hours to kill the enemy, but they still hadn't finished cleaning up the battlefield even when the sky turned dark. The army had no choice but to rest and wait for the next day to start cleaning up. Tian, who left the 3rd Division's commander, Hu Bo to cooperate with Yao Yingjun while he led the army to Yunnan Manor not far away. In Yunnan Manor, peace had already been restored. The 5-star army's main reinforcements had arrived. Naturally, there was no need for the surrendered soldiers and ordinary citizens to defend the city. They could all return home to reunite with their families. For a moment, many sounds of joy and laughter could be heard from the various courtyards. Of course, there were also some people who died in battle. As their families, they naturally couldn't be happy. Fortunately, the 5-star army's compensation was generous enough. Although it didn't satisfy everyone, most people still accepted this form of compensation. After all, if they didn't follow the 5-star army, but followed the 3 provinces' kings or kingshiping instead, it would be impossible for them to receive these benefits even if they died. This battle also made the citizens fully aware of the value of peace. People died in war. Who knew how many families were torn apart because of it? This was something that couldn't be bought with money. The 3 provinces' palace was also very lively at this time. The reinforcements had arrived. Beta Persei, Yongsan, and the others finally didn't have to worry so much. They finally had a chance to have a good meal and then sleep. Tian, who also brought the 1st Division and 2nd Division into the city. He personally went to the 3 provinces' palace to see Yang Chendong, 6th young master. The moment he saw Yang Chendong, Tian who couldn't help but cry. Without knowing the secret of Yang Chendong's possession, none of the high-ranking officers felt at ease this time. Okay, a man bleeds but not tears. Don't cry. Yang Chendong personally got up and helped Tian Hu up. 6th young master, your actions this time were too risky. But some people are too hateful. They actually want to deal with you. In this matter, the Southern Ming dynasty must be secretly supporting them. Do you think we should send troops to Nanjing? Please rest assured, 6th young master, my world's 1st cavalry army is willing to be the vanguard. After the greeting, Tian Hu took the initiative to ask for a battle. With the current strength of the world's 1st cavalry army, these words could be said and done. Yang Chendong knew this, but he decisively shook his head. Tian Hu, this young master can understand your feelings, but now is not the time to do this. The Southern Ming dynasty is full of Han people. It would be best if it can be accepted peacefully. Accepted peacefully? Is there such a possibility? Tian Hu asked with some doubts. The process is of course tortuous, but this young master already has an idea. You don't have to worry. Yang Chendong once again showed a confident smile. In the Southern Ming dynasty, he had already played a big game of chess. If the other party agreed, it would be fine. If they didn't agree, then he would be doomed. Nanning Prefecture. As the capital of Guangxi Province, the general's mansion in Nanning Prefecture was also brightly lit. The general of Guangxi Province, Bai Kuan, was currently sitting cross-legged. Although this was his mansion, there was still a hint of nervousness on his face. Opposite Bai Kuan was a scholar in a long robe. This person's appearance was not ordinary, and he looked very kind. If it wasn't for the arrogance that flashed in the corner of his eyes from time to time, he would have given people a better impression. The scholar in the long robe reached out and took a sip of the tea. He frowned slightly. Obviously, the rough tea leaves made him somewhat unhappy. However, when he thought of his mission, he didn't say anything about this matter. On the contrary, he said against his will, "Good tea. Assistant Minister Zhou is too polite. How can a martial artist like me know what good tea is? As long as you are happy, I will be happy." He constantly paid attention to the actions of the man in the long robe. Some flattering words came out of his mouth. He really had to be polite. This Assistant Minister Zhou was the left Assistant Minister of the Southern Ming Dynasty's Ministry of Rights, Zhou Ziong. It was said that he was deeply favored by the emperor. For a martial artist like him, it was usually impossible to invite him to sit together. Now that he finally had the opportunity to sit together, of course, he would try his best to please him. Chapter 1598. Not to mention, Bai Kuan was also a criminal. Who told him to be a subordinate of the 3 provinces' king, Zhu Huiyun? The commoners didn't know, but how could he not know? The Southern Ming Imperial Court didn't have any impression of the 3 provinces' king. If it wasn't for the fact that they needed to use this barrier to block the 5-star army, they would have already dealt with him. Now that Bug Nam of Gojoseon and the 3 provinces' king were fighting, no matter who won or lost, the Southern Ming Imperial Court didn't need to make a move. This was a great thing. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Zhou Ziong suddenly appeared and represented Zhu Qizhen in recruiting Bai Kuan. Zhu Qizhen was the emperor of the Great Ming Dynasty, and Bai Kuan was just a martial artist. How could he not agree? How could he dare to disagree? This led to the scene where the two of them sat together. Now that everyone was seated together, Zhou Ziang was obviously the leader. Whatever he said, Bai Kuan obeyed. This was also a general's respect for the imperial power and his desire for power. Considering the great Ming dynasty's emphasis on literature and suppression of military power, military officials had never had a high social status. Many military officials even had to lower their heads to civil officials to ensure their position. They needed to find a backer. Bai Kuan simply treated Zhou Ziang as a backer and respected him. Speaking of which, Bai Kuan had only been a chilly arch in the past. It was only because Zhu Huixin had taken a liking to him that Bai Kuan had promoted him and given him the authority to command the entire Guangxi army. That was how he had gained his current reputation. Zhou Ziang looked down on such a rootless person from the bottom of his heart. If it wasn't for the fact that he still needed Bai Kuan, he wouldn't even look at him. However, Guangxi's position was very important now. It replaced the original Yunnan manor and became Bugnam of Gojosian's border. This also caused Bai Kuan's status to rise, which was why Zhou Ziang lowered himself to come here. However, no matter what, the tradition of scholars looking down on martial artists was still there. As for Bai Kuan's flattery, Zhou Ziang thought that everything was normal. Zhou Ziang pretended to be very enthusiastic and said to Bai Kuan, "General Bai, this time, the emperor is very optimistic about you." After knowing that General Bai has abandoned the dark side and joined the light side, he was very happy. He even handed over the military power of Guangxi to you. You can't let the emperor down. Yes, yes. This general thanks His Majesty for his benevolence. But this lowly one knows that this was all because of Assistant Minister Zhou, so this lowly one is even more grateful. When you leave in a while, I have a small gift to send you off. Bai Kuan said humbly, as if giving Zhou Ziang a gift was a great job. Ha ha. Seeing how sensible Bai Kuan was, Zhou Ziang chuckled. General Bai is too polite. It would be impolite for this old man to refuse. In fact, we are all working for His Majesty, so it is only right that we work hard. Yes, it is only right that we work for His Majesty. Bai Kuan repeated these words. Oh, that's right. General Bai, I don't know if you've thought about it, but no matter who wins or loses this battle, there will be people coming to look for you very soon. I wonder how you will deal with them? Zhou Ziang joked as he brought the topic back to business. Bai Kuan was very clear that this was a test for him. He had asked himself this question before. At this moment, he did not hesitate to answer. Is there even a need to ask? I, Bai Kuan, am a man of Southern Ming. Even if I die, I will be a ghost of Southern Ming. Whether it is the 3 provincial kings or Bugnam of Gojosian, they are nothing. If they dare to come, they will definitely hit a wall. Our Guangxi prefecture's 50,000 soldiers are not to be trifled with. Haha, good. General Bai is very bold. Come, let this assistant minister toast you with tea. This result was very pleasing to Zhou Ziang's ears. Naturally, his mood was very good. This general doesn't dare. This general is the one toasting you. Bai Kuan smiled, revealing a row of teeth as he raised the teacup in his hand. The two looked at each other and drank. After putting down the teacup, Zhou Ziang chuckled. Actually, things might not be that bad. Although Bugnam of Gojosian is powerful, he has already entered Yunnan Prefecture and is a turtle in a jar. Perhaps the 3 provincial kings have already taken him down. Furthermore, we still have Shiping King in Yunnan. He will keep an eye on that place. Nothing will happen. Even if someone wants to harm Guangxi, this assistant minister has already spoken to the Guangdong political commissioner, Xianxia. When the time comes, the Guanghai Guard will send reinforcements. At that time, with the geographical advantage, no one will be able to gain any advantage. Yes, yes, everything will be according to Sir Zhou's arrangements. Sir Zhou, this general is toasting you. Please have some tea. Bai Kuan nodded. He had the backing of the Southern Ming dynasty, so he was not afraid of anyone coming to find trouble with him. If anyone came, he would use all his strength to kick them out. At that time, he would be able to obtain military merits. One wanted to curry favor, while the other wanted to appease people. The atmosphere was getting better and better. About an hour later, Zhou Ziang left in satisfaction. Of course, before he left, someone had already handed him a 5,000 taels banknote. This made his smile even brighter. However, This brilliance did not last for long. After just one night, when Zhou Xiang woke up again, a servant placed the contents of the letter he had just received in front of him. When he read the contents, Zhou Xiang, who originally had a slight urge to pee, no longer had the urge to do so. He became extremely clear-headed. It says that the 3 provincial kings and Shiping King were captured by Wu Nanwu. Is this true? It can't be a mistake, right? Holding the letter, he asked the person who had delivered the letter with a look of disbelief. The messenger could feel Zhou Xiang's anger, so at this moment, he only knelt on the ground and did not even dare to raise his head. Zhou Xiang knew that the contents could not be wrong, but he did not dare to believe it. Didn't they say that Bug Nam of Gojoseon was arrogant and only brought 500 people into Yunnan Manor? The 3 provincial kings had prepared tens of thousands of soldiers and were waiting for the other party to fall into their trap. How did Zhu Huihua get captured? How did this trick work? There was also Shiping King Mubin. He was at the periphery of Yunnan Manor and should have acted according to the situation. If things went south, he could still escape if he could not win. How did he get captured? What exactly happened in the middle of all this? Zhou Xiang could not figure it out. Looking at the trembling messenger kneeling on the ground, he said, "Send a messenger pigeon to the Southern Cloud Manor's embroidered uniform guards. Ask them what happened and how it ended up like this. Report back to me after you figure it out." Finally, he could leave. The messenger in charge of the messenger pigeon quickly nodded and was about to leave. "Wait. This matter cannot be publicized now. If the news is leaked, I will take your life." Thinking that once the news was out, it might cause panic, so Zhou Xiang decided to suppress this matter first. "I understand." The messenger nodded in agreement and finally left, leaving Zhou Xiang alone to sit there and think. After a long time he sighed. Things changed so quickly that it was somewhat unbelievable. Zhou Xiang could not help but think that the situation in Guangxi seemed to be a bit dangerous. Guangxi was indeed in danger. Zhu Huihua was the king of 3 provinces. This time, Yang Chendong only brought 500 black cavalry and rushed into Yunnan Manor because Zhu Huihua promised that as long as he came, he would hand over the power of the 3 provinces. Although Zhu Huihua had broken his promise, Yang Chendong still kept his promise. Of course, now was the time to take back the power of the 3 provinces. It was just Guangxi. It was impossible to say that Yang Chendong valued it. Currently, Xianxia's territory was rich and populous, so Guangxi province was not a big deal. However, if he wanted to swallow the entire Great Ming, Guangxi was the only way. In addition, he was justified this time. How could he let go of such a good opportunity? First, he met Yao Yingjun and learned that Guizhou had changed sides and voluntarily joined Xianxia. Now that Yunnan was under his feet, and even Shiping's Wang Mubin was captured by him, it was time to solve the problem of Guangxi. Jiang Wuqing died a heroic death. Generous compensation. His family will be rewarded with land. If his children are of appropriate age, they can be sent to the Yang Clan School in Suxian City to study. Yao Yingjuan's loyalty is commendable. His personal ability is outstanding. Drafting the military affairs of Guizhou and Yunnan. When there is a suitable candidate in the future, he will be replaced. If the soldiers who follow Jiang Daqing are willing to join the 5-star army, they can pass the examination. Those who are not willing to join the army and are willing to follow the people will be given land. Captives must be protected. After paying money, they can also serve the people. Those who can't find a protector will have to serve the Xianxia according to their rank. When the time is up, they will be sent to other Xianxia provinces. They can also enjoy the respect of the Han people. In this battle, the surrendered generals will be judged according to their performance. Those who have performed meritorious deeds can be reduced to commoners. Those who do not change will be sentenced to death or 3 to 30 years of reform through labor. Orders came out of Yang Chendong's mouth. The chaos in Yunnan Prefecture was quickly being dealt with. At the same time, the food and other necessities from the other provinces were quickly distributed to Yunnan and Guizhou. This was to ensure that the people here had clothes to wear, food to eat, money to earn, money to spend, and things to buy. After all, this was the land of the Han people. Yang Chendong gave the people here sufficient respect. Not only did he not force them to move, but he also redistributed land and property to ensure that everyone had land to farm and things to do. Of course, the policy of relocation still had to be announced. Although Xianxia's territory was large enough, the number of Han people was still too small. This caused the influence of the Han people to be unable to reach the level that Yang Chendong wanted. Chapter 1599. If the millions of people in the two provinces were willing to migrate, it would greatly increase the number of Han people in the other Xianxia provinces. It would also allow Han culture to spread to other foreign races faster, allowing the custom of Han people being respected to continue. Since they wanted the remaining people to have land to farm, where would the land come from? They would need to take advantage of the rich, which were the nobles and gentry. If there was no suitable reason before, the assassination of Yang Chendong by the three great clans of Yunnan was the best reason. For example, the deceased head of the Li clan, Li Jiayin, all of his assets were confiscated immediately. According to the statistics, Li Jiayin's family alone occupied thousands of hectares of fertile land, silver, and all kinds of goods and shops amounted to 12 million taels of silver. When this harvest was reported to Yang Chendong, it gave him a fright. He had expected Li Jiayin to be rich, but he did not expect him to be so rich. Unfortunately, it was not desirable to hide wealth among the people. Those who were truly rich were misers. They only had themselves in their hearts, and they were even willing to betray their country and people for benefits. It was like the 8 great merchants of Xianxia in the late Ming dynasty. They earned money from the Ming dynasty's government and the people, but in the end, they funded the enemy. It was because of this that a small slave had occupied all of China's rivers and mountains. Thinking about it, wasn't the last emperor of the Ming dynasty, Chongzhen, defeated because he had no money and no pay? The funny thing was that an emperor needed to borrow money from his officials, but in the end, there was no one he could borrow money from. He did not know how many good words he said, but in the end, he persuaded his father-in-law to lend him 30,000 taels of silver. It seemed like he had dug out his heart and cut his flesh. But in reality, when the roaming king entered the capital, he actually plundered more than 6 million taels of silver from the emperor's father-in-law's house. With so much money, the emperor only borrowed 1/20 of the money and cried to the heavens and the earth. In the end, he lost both his life and wealth. Presumably, when he was killed by the roaming king, he regretted it, right? No. Not necessarily. Some people were like this. They would not shed tears until they saw the coffin, and even if they saw the coffin, they would not shed tears. They regarded money as more important than the sky, even more important than their own lives. She really didn't know how such people's brains were developed and what they were thinking. Having said that, even if Yang Chendong knew that there was such a thing, he would never allow the same thing to happen in his Yang family, especially under his nose. For this reason, he had formulated a series of rules when Xianxia was developing. For example, Xianxia encouraged business, but the business tax was very heavy, reaching 7 out of 10. In other words, the merchants of Xianxia had to pay a tax of 700 coins every time they made a profit. After deducting the expenses, only about 50 coins would fall into the hands of the merchants. By doing this, not only did it prevent some merchants from rising up, but it also filled the Xianxia's treasury. Also, Xianxia merchants were not allowed to be officials, not even within the 5 blessings. Once discovered, he would definitely be severely punished. At the very least, they would be stripped of their position and fined silver. At the very least, it would be possible for their entire family to be exterminated. Since ancient times, collusion between officials and merchants had always been a big problem, but it was unavoidable. Yang Chendong had set such a rule when he first created the rules. It was to prevent people from becoming too powerful under him. In the end, his descendants would also be under the control of others. Yang Chendong would never allow his descendants to borrow money from his officials one day. That would be too shameful, and it would be too much of a failure. Speaking of which, the matter of the Li family made Yang Chendong see the drawbacks of the great Ming dynasty. At the same time, he also began to deal with these people. For this reason, he specially formulated some rules for these officials and villagers. For example, ordinary people had the right to choose whether or not to migrate, or where to migrate to. However, these people did not have this right. Not only did they have to leave their homeland, but they also had to go to a place designated by Xianxia. Whether they liked it or not, they had to do so. Otherwise, the soldiers of the 5-star army would teach them a lesson. Also, before migrating, they had to conduct an in-depth investigation. For example, what kind of person were they? Did they oppress the people? Did they have a murder case? If there was, then sorry, they would be punished according to how they should be punished. If they were involved in a criminal case, they would be sentenced according to how they should be sentenced. If they caused deep resentment, they would be beheaded. When this policy was announced, it really scared a lot of people. In particular, the two families, Qin Yingkong and Wang Shufu, were taken to the largest square in Yunnan Manor. A public denunciation meeting was held, allowing the people who had suffered from their sufferings to complain. The scene could really be described as earth-shattering, and it could even make ghosts weep. This was because all the people in the city who heard the news came. The feeling of being able to see the usually high and mighty dignitaries bow their heads in front of them was really too good. The grievance meeting and the complaint meeting were held for a day. Later, it was confirmed that Qin Yingkong was guilty of the most heinous crimes. He colluded with the government to rob people of their land, occupied real estate, and even killed 56 people. When the evidence was presented one by one, Beta Persei announced on behalf of Yang Chendong that he would be executed on the spot, and his head would be chopped off in the square. As for the other members of the Qin family, they were also sentenced for their crimes. Some were beheaded, and some were sentenced to 3 to 30 years in prison. This really shocked a lot of people. When they saw that Bug Nam of Gojoseon was serious, the people cheered, while the dignitaries were pale. Those villagers who were usually good people were better off. At the very least, those who had a habit of deceiving the common people directly fainted. The people ran around to spread the news. They had taken revenge, and they were finally the masters. The next day, it was Wang Shufu's Wang family's turn. In contrast, Wang Shufu was usually reasonable. At least, he had not personally killed anyone. There were a few bastards in his family who were found to have been sentenced to a corresponding term after being found out. As for him, he was returned home without any charges. Only 90% of his family's property was confiscated, and he was allowed to take the remaining 10% and move to other provinces designated by Xianxia. This combination of punches was really just rewards and punishments. Seeing that the Wang family was fine, some people were relieved. At this point, the dignitaries that had troubled the Great Ming dynasty for many years were easily dealt with by Yang Chendong. This was because Yang Chendong was ruthless enough. In addition, he was the founder and had the power that no one could restrict, so he dared to do this. If his son wanted to do this, it would be very difficult. However, once the news spread, it would inevitably lead to conflicts between the dignitaries and the dignitaries of other provinces. When Yao Yingjun told this to Yang Chendong, he chuckled and said, "It's fine. We didn't intend to reason with them anyway. As long as they enter my Xianxia, they will either follow my rules or seek their own deaths. There is no third choice. Don't worry, they know what to choose." Yang Chendong had this confidence. Facts also prove that in the Han territory occupied by the Yang family in the future, although the dignitaries and squires there offset each other in every way, in the end, they did not form a climate and threat. In the end, from opposition to compromise, and then to the habit of following. This proved that as long as one was ruthless, there was no problem that could not be solved. The most important thing was whether one dared to be ruthless and whether they could carry it out. After dealing with the matters of the Qin and Wang clans, Yang Chendong handed these trivial matters over to Yao Yingjun. Yao Yingjun had authority and an army. With Yao Yingjun's ability, dealing with these matters was a piece of cake. On the other hand, Yang Chendong's thoughts were on the matter of conquering the Guangxi province. The Intelligence Bureau had already sent a secret report that the Guangxi general Bai Kuan had already contacted the Southern Ming dynasty and changed sides. Yang Chendong was not surprised at all by this result. Although in terms of strength, Xianxia was far above the Great Ming dynasty, in terms of influence, the Han territory still belonged to the Great Ming dynasty. Unless Yang Chendong carried out a bloody massacre in the land of Wuxia like he did to other alien races, he still needed to rely on the breath of Wuxia. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Yang Chendong did not want to use the methods he used to deal with the Outlanders in the Great Ming dynasty. As such, he would most likely come into contact with negotiations or economic blockades. Speaking of economic blockades, Yang Chendong had already prepared a method. Over the years, in order to maintain the relationship with the Southern Ming dynasty, Xianxia had sold large amounts of food to the Southern Ming dynasty at a low price. Sometimes, it was even cheaper than what he sold. Many times, Xianxia would even sell food to the Southern Ming dynasty at a loss in order to let the Southern Ming dynasty develop a habit of trusting him. In the past 10 years the results were quite good. At the very least, from the Intelligence Bureau's investigation, there were very few people who actually grew food in the Southern Ming dynasty. It was not profitable at all. It was better to buy the food than to grow it yourself. What would you choose? The direct result was that there was a large amount of uncultivated land in the Southern Ming dynasty. Many of the originally fertile lands were covered with weeds that were half the height of a person. Because of this, the Southern Ming dynasty wanted to manage the land and had tried before. However, they found that after investing a lot of manpower and resources, the final results were not very good. When they even lost money, no one had any ideas about the land. There was no profit. In the current Southern Ming dynasty, at least 9.5 out of 10 pieces of land were uncultivated. At this time, if the food supply to the Southern Ming dynasty was suddenly cut off, one could imagine what kind of effect it would have. Of course, the Southern Ming dynasty was also full of talents. They seemed to be afraid that this problem would affect the imperial court, so they built a granary in advance and filled it with food. It was said that it was enough to feed the entire Southern Ming dynasty for 2 years. In other words, once Xianxia cut off their food supply, they would have 2 years to deal with it. In this way, the problem could be solved. However, since Yang Qindong was prepared to use the food supply issue to threaten the Southern Ming dynasty, how could they not have any methods? Chapter 1600. Was it a granary? Did they store a lot of food? Was it enough to last them for 2 years? Were they not afraid of Xia's threats anymore? That was simple, just burn it. Speaking of which, what Xianxia did not lack the least was food. Not every place had a climate suitable for large and small factories, and not every place could start light and heavy industries. However, most places could be used for farming. With the current vastness of the Yang family's territory, the number of fields had long reached an astonishing level. With the addition of the steam engine, transportation would become even more convenient. The problem of transporting food had been solved, and the transfer of food from the north to the south would not be as laborious as before. Under these conditions, food would not be a problem to stifle the development of the 5-star army. Moreover, because of Xia's policy of never increasing taxes on land, there were still many farmers. As long as there was enough money, it would be very convenient to reclaim the land. If they were pushed too far, they would burn all the food. This was Yang Qindong's method of dealing with the Southern Ming dynasty. Although it was a bit violent and direct, the results would be very good. Of course, this was the last resort. What he needed to do now was to negotiate. At the very least, he needed to make his stance clear. Just like how he appeared in Yunnan Manor with 500 black knights and dragon guards, wasn't such a risk also for the sake of righteousness and justice? Yang Qindong was also clear about taking back Guangxi. This was what the 3 provinces' king, Zhu Huixing, had promised him. Now that he was sending troops to Guangxi, no one could say anything. Another 5 days had passed, and the situation in Yunnan Manor had stabilized again. Yao Yingjun had a stick in one hand and candy in the other. He had subdued those who opposed him, and even roped in a group of dignitaries and country gentry who supported him. After consulting with Yang Qindong, Yao Yingjun stated that as long as these people cooperated well with the work, they could take away 20% of the wealth when they left their homeland. Seeing that the general trend was changing, more and more of the so-called local tyrants began to support Yao Yingjun and Yang Qindong's reform. Once the matters in Southern Cloud Prefecture were sorted out, all they needed to do was to copy the gourd and draw a ladle, and then extend it to other prefectures. Yunnan Manor no longer had any major problems. Various reinforcements had also entered Yunnan Manor during this period of time. It was time for Yang Qindong to consider the matter of invading Guangxi. Before he could make a move, and before he could think of which main force to bring, news came that the Southern Ming Empire had already sent an envoy that was 10 miles away from the Southern Cloud Prefecture. A messenger came to report that Bugnam of Gojoseon was to personally go out of the city to welcome the envoy. Yang Qindong was a little surprised that the Southern Ming envoy had arrived first. In his opinion, now that he had won a great victory, the other party should be afraid and should be defending to the death. How could there be someone who had the courage to take the initiative to meet him? Yang Qindong ignored the fact that he had to go out of the city to welcome them. To exaggerate, with his current status, Even if the Southern Ming Emperor, Zhu Qizhan, came personally, he could say that he didn't want to welcome them. What could others do about it? Ba Daojiang, go take a look. Yang Chendong didn't send out Beta Persei. In his opinion, Ba Daojiang's level was enough to deal with a Southern Ming envoy. Yes. Ba Daojiang, who received the order, immediately cupped his fists and agreed. Then, he ordered 100 black cavalry and left the prince's mansion. Here, with the arrival of various reinforcements, Captain Qiu Vi also rushed to Southern Cloud Prefecture with 1,500 black cavalry and took over the security of the prince's mansion. Outside Southern Cloud Prefecture, Southern Ming Empire's left Assistant Minister of Rights, Zhou Ziong, was sitting in a soft sedan with his head raised. Although it was a soft sedan, the days of hurrying on the road had tormented him. This could be seen from his pale face. He was just a scholar. Usually, there were people to serve him when he wore clothes in the mansion. Now that he had to travel such a long distance, how could he not be tired? But now, all the tiredness had been put to the back of his mind. He was more concerned about whether the person he sent to act as the vanguard had entered Yunnan Manor, whether he had met Yang Chendong, and whether he had spoken of his request. The so-called letting Yang Chendong personally come out to welcome them was actually Zhou Ziang's idea. This time, Zhou Ziang was appointed by the Imperial court to deal with the problem of the 3 provinces. But since it was an Imperial order, how could he dare to disobey? That was why he wanted to test him. He wanted to see how much respect this Bug Nom of Gojosian had for the Southern Ming Empire. This would determine his attitude. As a member of the civil officials group, Zhou Ziang had his own pride. But he was not stupid. He was very clear about what could be done and what could not be done. The process of waiting had always felt long. Zhou Ziang sat in the sedan and waited for 4 hours. But these were the hottest 4 hours of the day. He had been waiting since noon until now. He felt as if his whole body was about to be oiled. Zhou Ziang, whose throat was about to smoke from the sun, could not help but curse in his heart. He thought that Yang Chendong deliberately did this to express his sincerity. He had already traveled 5 miles. At this moment, he was only 5 miles away from Southern Cloud Prefecture. With such a short distance, he did not believe that the welcoming team had not arrived after such a long time. There was only one possibility. Yang Chendong was deliberately basking in the sun. When he thought of this, Zhou Ziang's face turned ugly. He had a strong feeling that this mission would not be so easy to complete. It might even be impossible to complete. Finally, after Zhou Ziang did not know how many times he cursed in his heart, a group of cavalry finally came from afar. From afar, there were not many people, but the group was unusually orderly. It actually gave off a faint sense of oppression. Zhou Ziang finally could not help but curse. This was indeed unbecoming of a scholar, but if it was anyone else, they would not be able to help but curse when they saw that the welcoming team was moving slower than a snail. Yes, the team from afar was indeed moving very slowly. Ba Daojiang, who was at the front, rode on a horse and deliberately slowed down. He had been by Yang Chendong's side for more than 10 years. Although he did not completely understand the 6th young master, he could sometimes understand the meaning behind his gaze. Since the Southern Ming Empire's envoy was so arrogant, Ba Daojiang would make them uncomfortable. What? Do you really think that our 6th young master is someone you can order around? Even if Zhu Qizhan was here, he would not dare to be so arrogant. Since that was the case, Ba Daojiang was naturally going to have some fun. He purposely slowed down his speed so that the emissary and the others could enjoy the scorching sun. This was just a small matter. He still had some big moves that he had yet to use. The team slowly moved forward and finally arrived in front of the envoy's team. At this moment, Zhou Ziang was no longer angry. Now, he just wanted to enter the Southern Cloud Manor and have a good rest. What? Bug Nom of Gojosian did not come? Although he had already expected that Yang Chendong would not be in the welcoming team, as the envoy of the Southern Ming Empire, he still wanted to save face. Therefore, he still pretended to ask this question. Bug Nom of Gojosian is busy with something important. Envoy, are you entering the city? Ba Daojiang did not explain much and replied with a very arrogant attitude. Zhou Ziang was not stupid. Of course, he understood the hidden meaning in this sentence. It was saying that the matter he was here for was insignificant.
Thinking that he was the envoy of the Southern Ming Empire and did not need to lower himself to the level of a nameless person, he coldly snorted and pulled the curtain.
Let's go. Enter the city. Enter the city. There were close to 1,000 people in the envoy team. They were also exposed to the scorching sun and had been impatient for a long time. Now that they could finally enter the city, their faces were filled with joy. They hurriedly agreed and raised their placards, struck their gongs, and beat their drums. It seemed to be quite a show of force. Hee hee. Ba Daojiang sneered in his heart when he saw that the 1,000 people were still acting like this. Then, he also turned his horse around.
However, only those who were very close to him noticed that Ba Daojiang, who had turned his head, had a trace of a malicious smile on his face.
Giddy up, giddy up. The black cavalry began to move. They were moving slowly just a moment ago, but this time, they began to speed up.
As the war horses galloped, the yellow sand on the official road flew up like a gust of wind and drifted towards the 1,000 people of the envoy team. The yellow sand that came out of nowhere hit the entourage of the envoys, causing them to cough violently and curse loudly.
Why are you so slow? Hurry up. Follow our team.
After waiting for the yellow sand to fall to the ground, the 100 black cavalry suddenly galloped back.
After Ba Daojiang greeted them, the war horses continued to gallop, causing the yellow sand to fly up again. Anyone who was not a fool could see that the other party was doing this intentionally. Think about it, how could they be faster than the light cavalry while carrying so many things while walking? As they went back and forth, many of the entourage of the envoy team were covered in sand. Some of them even had sand in their eyes. However, they were still carrying things in their hands and could not put them down. They could only endure it as they walked. Tears flowed down their cheeks uncontrollably. Nay! As if to show off his superb horsemanship, Ba Daojiang rode back again. The war horse raised its front hooves and kicked up a huge amount of sand. Then, it suddenly landed, kicking up a huge amount of dust. Ba Daojiang was not the only one who did this. The 100 black cavalry behind him did the same. In this way, the Southern Ming officials in the envoy team looked as if they had crawled out of yellow mud. A casual shake could cause half a caddy of yellow sand to fall off. They looked as pathetic as they could. Chapter 1601. Hurry up and keep up with our speed. It was the same sentence that the senior had said. Soon after, Ba Daojiang once again spurred his horse forward, stirring up sand and dust.
What's going on?
Zhou Ziang, who was sitting in the palanquin, did not know what was happening outside. He only felt that the procession was moving and stopping, so he lifted the curtain. It was this action that allowed countless yellow sand to enter the palanquin, causing Zhou Ziang, who was unprepared, to sneeze. Achoo, what is this? What's going on?
He continuously fanned himself with his right hand until the black cavalry moved a little further away.
Finally, the scene in front of him became clear. Then, Zhou Ziang saw a group of people covered in yellow sand in front of him. Ah! Seeing that the originally neat group had become like this, Zhou Ziang instinctively wanted to reprimand them. This group represented the image of the Southern Ming Empire. How could they behave like this? What would others think if they saw this?
However, as soon as he opened his mouth, a gust of sand hit his face and was sucked into his mouth.
He immediately choked and shut his mouth. At this moment, he only felt that his mouth was full of sand. How could he have the time to reprimand others? Let's go quickly. It was unknown who shouted first in the group, but the others only hesitated for a moment before increasing their speed. Since there was sand and dust everywhere, it was better to walk faster. This way they would suffer less. First, they walked quickly. In the end, they unknowingly started running. Even so, the sand and dust still hit their bodies. It could be said that they were in an extremely sorry state. At the east gate of Southern Cloud Manor, the commoners who had heard the news had already run over to watch. It seemed to be human nature to watch a show. When Yang Qindong entered the city, they came out to watch. Now that they knew that the group of envoys from the Southern Ming Empire had arrived, they also came out to watch. Speaking of which, although Southern Cloud Manor was the territory of the Southern Ming Empire and had always considered itself a citizen of the Southern Ming Empire, ever since Zhu Huichen was conferred the title of King of 3 provinces, they rarely heard any news about the Southern Ming Empire. Zhu Huichen wasn't a very capable person, but his ambition wasn't small. In order to change the views of the commoners, he forbade his subordinates from talking about the southern Ming dynasty. Now that he was captured alive, this ban was naturally lifted. When these commoners found out that there was a show to watch, more and more people gathered. Hey, don't you guys think that the southern Ming Imperial Court's envoy delegation is very impressive? A trusting commoner in the crowd asked. Of course. A young man who looked like a scholar said arrogantly. He had studied Confucianism for more than 10 years, and some of his ideas had long been deeply ingrained. Such a person yearned for the imperial examinations of the great Ming dynasty, and dreamed that one day he would be nominated for the imperial examinations. If that happened, he would really be able to bring glory to his ancestors and become a person above others. The scholar proudly added, "How could you illiterate elders understand the might of the southern Ming imperial court? Do you know the majesty of the emperor in the throne room? You should know that the great Ming dynasty values face the most. This time, the great Ming dynasty has sent a diplomatic mission. Of course, they will be very awe-inspiring. At that time, you will definitely be surprised." Is that true? Will they be even more impressive than the black cavalry that Bugnam of Gojoseon brought into the city? A commoner in the crowd clearly didn't believe it and asked. Of course. Their might is not something that you can imagine. Although Bugnam of Gojoseon's guard of honor is not bad, compared to the southern Ming imperial courts, it is still far from enough. The scholar was still full of arrogance, but he wasn't stupid. He didn't dare to say anything that was unfavorable to Yang Chendong. Speaking of which, these scholars who studied Confucianism didn't have a good impression of Yang Chendong. All of this was because if one wanted to become an official in the Xianxia imperial court, one needed to have true knowledge. It wasn't enough to just say a few words or write a beautiful essay. That would only work if he had the goods in his stomach. The best way was to apply for the Xianxia imperial court and wait for graduation before being allocated. For scholars who had studied Confucianism for more than 10 years, this method was no different from learning it all over again. Who knew how much time would be wasted? So how could they be interested in Yang Chendong? It was only because Yang Chendong was too powerful. He even killed 2 of the 3 great clans of Southern Cloud Prefecture. This battle formation really scared some people. They were unconvinced, but they didn't dare to say it out loud. When the commoners heard the scholar's words, they became even more curious. They wanted to see how impressive the so-called Southern Ming Imperial Court's envoy was. After seeing it, they could boast to their friends and relatives. Inside the city gate, the number of commoners increased. After some of the scholars' exaggeration, everyone's curiosity towards the envoys grew. Some people even began to imagine how heroic and domineering the so-called Southern Ming Imperial Court's envoy would be. "They're here, they're here." A person with good eyesight in the crowd shouted loudly. This seemed to be an order from the general. With this shout, everyone's attention was drawn to the city gate. Then, under everyone's gaze, the 100 black cavalry took the lead and moved out. Wow! A group of black cavalry. Indeed impressive. Bullshit. Just as someone opened his mouth, he was immediately criticized by others. Open your eyes and take a look. That's Bugnam of Gojoseon's black cavalry. They must have gone out of the city to welcome the envoy. After this explanation, the person who shouted previously had an awkward expression. Fortunately, at this moment, another person spoke. Look, the Southern Ming Imperial Court's envoy is here. That person really couldn't continue talking about how they were. Because the domineering and awe-inspiring Southern Ming Imperial Court didn't appear. Instead, a group of people with dusty faces and disheveled clothes suddenly appeared. It was as if they had lost a battle and had no formation. Following behind the black cavalry was indeed the Southern Ming Imperial Court's envoy. Originally, they were still very dignified. But first, they were baptized by dust and sand. Then they ran for a while. Each of them was covered in sweat. Some people couldn't take it anymore and simply unbuttoned their clothes. Only then did they feel cooler. Because of this, from afar, they didn't look like an envoy at all. On the contrary, they were in an extremely sorry state. To put it bluntly, they weren't much better than the fleeing commoners. This is the awe-inspiring and domineering Southern Ming Imperial Court's envoy? In the crowd, there were commoners who couldn't help but ask. That's right, I can't see how impressive they are. They aren't much better than us commoners. That's right.
That's right. Who was the one who said that the Southern Ming Imperial Court's envoy represents the face of the Southern Ming Imperial Court and is very mighty?
The commoners were all talking one after another. At this moment, the scholars in the crowd had already lowered their heads with a look of shame. If there was a crack in the ground right now, they would have directly burrowed into it. The commoners were stunned. It was obvious that the appearance of the Southern Ming Imperial Court's envoy this time was very unsuccessful. It could even be described as a failure. Zhou Ziong, who was in the sedan, wasn't much better. He had just spat out the dust in his mouth, but there was still sand floating on his face. It could be said that he was in an extremely sorry state. He also knew that now that they had entered the city, according to his previous intention, the procession had to stop. Then, he would get down from the sedan and give a speech. In order to gain everyone's support, he had already obtained the imperial decree, and that was to announce that the scholars from Yunnan and Guizhou could go to Nanjing City at any time to take the exam. Because of Zhu Huihua, they would even receive a certain amount of preferential treatment. Zhou Ziong believed that once these words were spoken, he would quickly obtain the support of these scholars. As a result, Yang Qindong's position in the Southern Cloud Manor would be greatly shaken. At that time, he wouldn't be in the mood to think about solving the problem of Guangxi, and that would be the best time for him to negotiate. But all of this was disrupted by Ba Daojiang's welcoming ceremony. Right now, he absolutely couldn't get down from the sedan. Otherwise, wouldn't it be a disgrace? With no intention of getting down from the sedan, the envoy group quickly followed behind the 100 black cavalry. The other members of the envoy group also lowered their heads as much as they could. Clearly, they also knew that their current image was not good and it was best not to see people. Ba Daojiang rode on his horse and looked at the reactions of the commoners and the envoy group. He nodded in satisfaction. Then, he took the lead and led Zhou Ziong to the relay station in the city. In order to accommodate the 1,000 people of the envoy group, the surrounding courtyards of the relay station were cleared. It was enough to accommodate them. Seeing that many 5-star army soldiers were leaving the clean courtyards, Ba Daojiang cupped his hands and said to Zhou Ziong, "This is the relay station. You must be tired from the long journey, so rest for now. Right, the security in the city isn't too good right now, so it's best if you don't go out. Otherwise, if something happens, no one will be responsible." Ha! After saying this, without waiting for Zhou Ziong to ask anything, Ba Daojiang spurred his horse and led the black cavalry into the distance. Zhou Ziong opened his mouth, but in the end, he had no choice but to swallow the words he wanted to say back into his stomach. Originally, Zhou Ziong wanted to ask when he would be able to see Bugnam of Gojoseon, but after thinking about it, since he was already here, why would he be afraid of not being able to see Bugnam of Gojoseon? Thus, he decided to take a good rest first. The most important thing was to wash up properly. Speaking of which, his body was currently covered in sand and dust, which was very uncomfortable. After leaving the relay station, Ba Daojiang returned to the 3 provinces' king's mansion and reported to Yang Qindong. "You did well. Have the other matters been arranged?" Yang Qindong had already heard about Ba Daojiang's actions. When he thought of the Southern Ming Kingdom's envoy group's disheveled appearance, he couldn't help but feel a burst of laughter. "Young master, everything has been arranged. Some of the veterans disguised as commoners are strolling outside the relay station. As long as these people dare to come out, they will definitely be taught a lesson." Ba Daojiang chuckled. Those veterans were masters who killed without batting an eyelid. If the Southern Ming Kingdom's envoy group really didn't listen, then a few people would really die. Chapter 1602. As for whether the Southern Ming envoys would pursue this matter? What's wrong? I've already told you that the security in the city isn't good and there are many bandits, but you didn't believe me. Who can you blame for this? While Ba Daojiang was still thinking about these matters, Yang Qindong had already opened his mouth. "Let's put the matter of the diplomatic mission aside for now. Inform Commander Tian Hu that he can bring his troops into Guangxi. If anyone resists, beat them until they submit. The 2nd Regiment will assist them on this matter. Oh right, before you go, don't forget to bring the royal proclamation written by Zhu Huiyun." Yang Qindong had no intention of negotiating with the Southern Ming Imperial Court. At least, not when it came to Guangxi. This time, he had taken the risk to enter Yunnan Prefecture for the rights to govern the 3 provinces. Now that he had won, the 3 provinces should belong to him. Even the Southern Ming Empire couldn't stop him. Besides, why would the king of Shiping attack him? Without the Southern Ming Empire's agreement, would he dare to do so? Since the Southern Ming Empire wanted to play dirty, he didn't mind showing off his skills and letting them know his strength. This was what they meant by, "I'll reason with you, and you'll play dirty with me. Since that's the case, when you want to reason with me, I'll show you my fist." Xiqing Prefecture. As one of the borders between Guangxi and Yunnan. On this day, a large number of 5-star armies suddenly appeared outside the city. When the soldiers guarding the city saw this scene, their expressions changed greatly and they went to inform the prefect, Wang Bang. Wang Bang was a grand scholar, but his ranking wasn't high.
Later, it was because his family donated money and the Southern Ming Empire was in need of people that he was able to get this job.
Before this, he was just a small official. This time, it was because of his relationship with Zhou Xiang that he was able to get such a good job as the prefect. As soon as he ascended to the position, Wang Bang's greedy and perverted side was revealed. First, after entering the city, he invited all the nobles and villagers to a meal and obtained many benefits.
Following that, all the young ladies in the city had married 3 concubines in a short span of a few days.
It could be said that he was radiating a second spring in his life.
When the servants came to report the news, he was in his own bedroom teasing Third Madam.
The shout from outside almost made him impotent.
In his anger, he couldn't help but curse.
"Who is it? Don't you know that this official is doing something important? Why bother me?" Sir, something bad has happened. There are a lot of 5-star army outside the city. It seems like they are going to attack the city." The messenger shouted anxiously.
5 what?
The room was silent for a moment, followed by the sound of clothes being put on. Wang Bang quickly put on his official uniform and walked out.
He stared at the informant and said, "Say that again."
"Sir, there are many cavalrymen from the 5-star army outside the city. It seems that if we don't open the gate, they will attack. What is this Bugnom of Gojosian trying to do? Is he openly declaring war on the Southern Ming dynasty? Has he ever considered the consequences?" Wang Bang yelled in an attempt to intimidate others. However, he felt that there were no outsiders here and shouting like this would not have any effect. Thus, he stopped talking and walked out. "Let's go and take a look. This official wants to see who has the guts to do this." Wang Bang was really angry. At this moment, his anger was overflowing. He wanted to have a good talk with the 5-star army.
The reason why he had such an attitude was because he was not afraid of the 5-star army.
Speaking of which, when Wang Bang was working in the Nanjing government, he had heard a bit about the 5-star army. However, because Zhu Qizhen intentionally downplayed the 5-star army's influence on the Southern Ming dynasty, unless it was a high official, ordinary officials and commoners didn't think that the 5-star army was that powerful. Especially in these years, the 5-star army had been supplying large amounts of food to the Southern Ming dynasty at a very low price. This caused people to interpret it as the 5-star army being afraid of the Southern Ming dynasty, which was why they were doing this. This made many people feel good about themselves. Wang Bang was one of them. He always felt that he was a member of the Southern Ming dynasty, and the 5-star army was just Bugnom of Gojosian's army. No matter how powerful this person was, he still had to look up to the Southern Ming emperor. Since that was the case, what was there to be afraid of?
It was with this thought in mind that Wang Bang personally went up the city gate tower to face the 1st Cavalry Army and the 2nd Division of the Lung Feng Army.
Wang Bang climbed to the top of the city gate tower and looked up. He could see the scene of the 5-star army forming up outside the city. When he saw that the other party was about to force their way into the city without opening the city gate, the big-hearted magistrate Wang directly stretched out his right hand and pointed with his right index finger while shouting, "Are you the 5-star army? Don't you know that Xi City belongs to the Southern Ming dynasty? What do you want to do? Do you want to offend your superiors?" Tian Hu and Division Commander Xiao Feng were chatting at the bottom of the city gate. It was just a small Xi City prefecture. They didn't care about it at all. In their opinion, as long as the people guarding the city weren't stupid, the most they should do was open the gate and surrender when they saw them. In the past, when they faced other ferocious foreign races, didn't such things happen often? No matter who you were, when you were faced with tyrannical strength, the only thing you had to do was to lower your head. Only then would you be able to continue living. It was precisely because they were too optimistic that when they saw Wang Bang pointing at them and shouting angrily, Tianhu, Xiao Feng, and the others were stunned. After a while, Tianhu couldn't help but say, "Who the hell is this? Why does he feel so good? Isn't he afraid that we won't say anything? How dare he provoke us?" In Tianhu's eyes, anyone who dared to criticize the first cavalry army in front of him was a serious provocation. There was nothing to say to such a person. There was only one word to say. Beat him. Beat him until he submitted. That's right, what a big idiot. Xiao Feng, who was at the side, also agreed. He hadn't met such a weirdo in a long time. Haha, then it's settled. I just hope that he won't be too arrogant. Tianhu chuckled and waved his hand. His guard captain, Hu Helu, responded and rode down the city gate. Although they had already decided to teach Wang Bang a lesson, they still had to go through the necessary process. When Hu and Lu Wei arrived at the city gate, they picked up a scroll that looked like an imperial edict, opening it up and reading it out loud. The kings of the 3 provinces have given their orders. Today, the 5-star army will be taking over Guangxi. All the officials in Guangxi are to cooperate fully if they see this king. As Hu Helu read, he looked up at the city gate as if he was looking at an idiot. He wanted to see what kind of reaction this southern Ming official would have after hearing this. When he raised his head, he couldn't help but be shocked. Almost instinctively, he hurriedly moved to the right. Just as he finished his movement, an arrow flew past where he was standing and stabbed into the ground. Hu Helu was less than 20 steps away from the city gate tower. At this distance, as long as one had the strength, they would be able to shoot an arrow and threaten others. Fortunately, Wang Bang wasn't familiar with bows and arrows. Otherwise, if it was another archer, it wouldn't have been so easy to dodge. What bullshit king of 3 provinces? This is Southern Ming's Guangxi, not someone's Guangxi. You all should quickly retreat. Otherwise, if we meet with weapons and lose your life, you can't blame anyone. Wang Bang shot an arrow. Although it didn't hit his opponent, it still gave Hu Helu a fright. The southern Ming soldiers on the city gate tower laughed heartily. When Wang Bang heard the laughter, he became very spirited. When he spoke, his righteous words were filled with righteousness. Damn, they actually made the first move. Haha, now there's nothing to say. Tianhu also saw Wang Bang's appearance when he shot the arrow. After seeing that Hu Helu was fine, he let out a sigh of relief and then laughed loudly. Originally, he thought that if he made the first move, wouldn't it be bad if word got out? Now that the other party made the first move, there was nothing wrong with what he did. There's nothing to say. How about this, Commander Tian, you call them back first. The cannons don't have eyes. Don't accidentally hurt our own people. At this moment, Xiao Feng's eyes were also wide open. When he looked carefully, there was only excitement. Originally, he thought that if the defending general was tactful, they wouldn't be of any use. However, he didn't expect to meet such a strong person in the first city. How could he be polite? He would just blast them. Commander Hu, come back. Commander Lin, mount the field cannons and aim at them. Blast them. After the 2 orders were given, Hu Helu turned his horse around and returned. The 5-star army also had cannons pushed forward from the rear. On the city gate tower of Sea City, when he saw Hu Helu retreating without saying anything, Wang Bang looked up to the sky and laughed. He said to the soldiers beside him, "Did you see that? They're scared. Some people are like this. If you don't show them some power, they won't know how many eyes you have." Yes, the prefectural magistrate is right. The prefectural magistrate is mighty. Ha ha ha. When he heard this, Wang Bang's face lit up with excitement. At this moment, it was as if he was possessed by the god of war. He even thought that if his actions were to spread to the southern Ming dynasty, he would definitely be rewarded. He laughed to himself and thought about his beautiful future. Suddenly, someone beside him said, "My lord, look. What are they doing?" Following the direction of the finger, 10 field cannons were pushed out and pushed to the front line. The west gate of Sea City was also within the range of the cannons. There was a saying that the truth of the great Ming dynasty was born from everyone's bickering and bragging in the imperial court. The truth of the world was always within the range of the cannons. Chapter 1603. This time, The Leng Feng army was going to teach these arrogant southern Ming officials a lesson.
They were going to tell them that their arrogance had long been trampled under their feet.
To deal with them, they only needed to fire the cannons and everything would be over. Fire! When the 10 field cannons were ready, Artillery Battalion Commander Lin Luan gave a shout and the 10 cannons roared in unison. Beams of light flashed and drew a beautiful arc in the air before landing on the city wall of Sea City opposite. At this moment, Wang Bang was still standing there with his hands on his waist and an arrogant look on his face.
His sense of superiority made him not believe that the 5-star army would dare to fire at him.
He was an official of the Southern Ming dynasty and was considered a direct descendant of the emperor. He was not someone that Bug Nam of Gojoseon, who was forced to be conferred the title, could compare to.
Not to mention, the one who came this time was not Bug Nam of Gojoseon, but a general that he had never heard of before.
Do you have a lot of cavalry? So what? Were the grassland cavalry strong or not? Weren't they still defeated by the great Ming dynasty?
Now that he had a strong city in his hands, he did not believe that these boorish soldiers would dare to do anything to him.
The more he did not believe, the more arrogant he became. Wang Bang had already thought about it. He wanted to use this opportunity to prove himself. He wanted to tell the world that not only was he greedy, he was also a very courageous person. As long as the Imperial court was willing to put him in an important position, the 5-star army would definitely be defeated in front of him. He would become the nemesis of the 5-star army. The more he thought about it, the more he thought about it. He even thought about how the Southern Ming Emperor would reward him after this battle. Would he be transferred back to Nanjing? After all, there were too many rich people there. That was the place where he should display his talents. It was not like Sea City where there were too few rich people. He had not even used his full strength yet, but he had already plundered 50 to 60% of the rich people. It was not a challenge at all. He still had a smile on his face as he thought about the beautiful future. At this moment, the cannonball whistled through the air.
In Wang Bang's eyes, he could even clearly see a beam of light flying straight towards him.
With a smile on his face, the cannons bombarded the city gate tower. This became the last pose and expression Wang Bang maintained before he died.
This was because one of the cannonballs had unfortunately landed about 4 steps in front of him, and the powerful force had directly sent him flying.
In mid-air, Wang Bang's body began to disintegrate, so much so that not even a complete corpse could be found. The bombardment began. Just the first round of cannon fire had sent Wang Bang flying. At the same time, the South Ming army's pride and arrogance had been destroyed. A few minutes ago, no one thought that the 5-star army would really open fire. Even if the field cannons were pushed out, they still thought that the other party was just trying to scare them.
Moreover, even if the cannons were to be fired, they had the advantage of the city walls, and their safety would be guaranteed for a short period of time.
They were the army of the Southern Ming dynasty. Although they used to follow the king of 3 provinces, Zhu Huichen, there were still many soldiers who had seen the world. They had seen the so-called red barbarian cannons that were loaded with live ammunition before. Other than looking quite scary, their power was only a so. It was impossible for them to destroy the city walls with a single wave of attacks. As long as they were given time, they would be able to defend the city and send reinforcements. With the support of the Southern Ming dynasty, as long as reinforcements continuously arrived, the 5-star army would definitely be defeated.
It was because they had underestimated the 5-star army's cannons that they did not know that the power of the cannons was not something that real cannons could compare to.
This caused them to walk further and further down the wrong path. When the cannonballs landed on the city gate tower, their power began to explode. Not only did they create a deep hole in the city wall, but the people within a dozen steps were either killed or injured. Only then did the Southern Ming army feel fear. However, it was too late now. The 10 cannonballs were only the first wave of probing attacks. After adjusting the coordinates, more and more cannonballs were fired at the city gate tower. Immediately, there were cries of ghosts and howls of wolves. Blood and limbs flew everywhere, flying past the heads of the terrified Southern Ming soldiers. Their courage had been broken, Wang Bang had died, and their backbone was gone. Right now, the city gate tower of Sea City was in chaos. Under the bombardment of cannonballs, there seemed to be no place that was safe. Everyone was fleeing in all directions. Often, when one went east, others would go west. However, in the end, they were all in the relatively limited area below the city gate tower. In the chaos, the generals could not find the soldiers,
and the soldiers could not find the generals. Even if they wanted to resist, it would be futile. It was during this chaos that the two cannons lowered their muzzles and began to fire at the west gate of Sea City. At this moment, Tian, who had told Division Commander Xiao Feng to organize the world's first cavalry army and prepare to charge. Not only that, behind the world's first cavalry army, Meng's 2nd Division and Meng 3rd Division were also prepared to enter and clean up the battlefield. This time, in order to intimidate the southern Ming, Yang Qindong had sent out 3 armies and 1 division. It could be said that he had made ample preparations. With such a powerful military advantage, even if the southern Ming really wanted to shed all pretense of cordiality, he would not be afraid of them sending an army. Under the ferocious bombardment of the field cannons, the city gate was blasted open in just a few hits. Then, the cavalry of the world's #1 cavalry army charged forward and rushed into the city through the blasted open city gate. They did not expect the 5-star army to attack so decisively and enter the city so quickly. The southern Ming soldiers inside the city were not prepared at all. Only a few soldiers guarding the city gate resisted. However, in front of the world's first cavalry army, their actions were like small boats in front of a tsunami. After the first wave passed, they did not have the ability to make any waves. Sea City was broken. From the beginning of the attack to entering the city, not even an hour had passed. The so-called strong city was broken just like that. After the news spread out, the faces of everyone who heard it greatly changed, especially the officials and generals of Guangxi. Their faces were unsightly. They were thinking, if the main force of the 5-star army came, what should they do? The conquest of Guangxi was still ongoing. It was not something that could be solved in a few days. After handing the matter to Tianhu and Xiao Feng, Yang Qindong did not take care of it anymore. Instead, he began to deal with the matters of Yunnan and Guizhou. Previously, he had given the authority of the 2 places to Yao Yingjun, and the other party had gladly accepted it. Moreover, he quickly arranged for people to bring Zhu Lian, who was also the Eternal Victory Princess. After being completely integrated into Xianxia, this title naturally became history and would not appear again, to the Southern Cloud Manor. He was using another method to show his loyalty to Yang Hodong. See, I even brought my family over. There is nothing to worry about. The 6th young master can also completely trust me. Regarding Yao Yingjuan's actions, Yang Qindong was naturally satisfied. It was because of this that he decided to stay for a while and properly train the other party to see if this person was suitable. After all, Yao Yingjun had always been doing intelligence work. Although he later led troops, he did not make too much of a name. Just like this, Yang Qindong stayed and helped Yao Yingjun come up with plans. Yang Qindong adopted a 3-step policy. First, he sent out the new army and the Russian division, a total of nearly 100,000 people, to attack the remnants of Yunnan and Guizhou. This included some mountain bandits who were usually kings of the mountains. If a place wanted to develop, the problem of public security must be solved first. If one's personal safety was not guaranteed, how could one attract others? Regarding this matter, Yang Qindong also gave instructions to Commander Su He and Division Commander A Huli before they left. This time, the opponents were mostly Han people, so they should not be killed unless the leaders were severely punished for their crimes. The others could be spared and promised to be given good land. When they returned to their ancestral homes, they could wait for their land to be distributed. As long as the people had an environment to rely on, not many people would really rebel. After all, those who rebelled could be beheaded at any time. The purpose of the rebellion was to survive. Even if they could live a good life as an ordinary citizen outside, why would they take such risks and risk their lives? Remember, you can't be careless. Especially pay attention to Mu Kong. As a native of Yunnan and the eldest son of the king of Shiping, his whereabouts are unknown. No one knows what he will do. This time, no matter who it is, capturing Mu Tsong will be a great achievement. After Yang Qindong gave a few more instructions, he sent the 2 generals out of the manor and let them do as they pleased. The second step of the 3 steps was to seize the time to distribute the land. Borrowing the leftover prestige of Yunnan's 3 great families being dealt with, the new Yang faction officials who were transferred over from Crimson City all began to get busy. After coming to the 3 provinces' king manors to receive their appointment letters, they rushed to various towns and county capitals. In order to stabilize the local people, the first thing to do was to provide them with a better living environment. Only then would they crowd around you. Some of your decisions and policies would be faster and more powerful. In order to prevent collusion between officials and merchants, a large number of Xianxia's reporters were also arranged. Using the words Yang Chendong said to the dispatched officials, their actions would be watched. If anyone was found to be in trouble or tarnishing the image of Xianxia in the eyes of the people, they would be dealt with severely. Not only him, but those who recommended him as an official and other descendants of the 5 blessings would also be affected.
Chapter 1604. In other words, if you were a piece of rat poop, you would spoil the entire pot of soup. A person could be hot-headed and not care about their own fate for their own selfish desires. However, it was impossible for a person to not care about the feelings of their loved ones. To be an official in Xianxia, the most basic requirement was that one's family background must be clean and they must have enough relatives. For example, if an orphan suddenly appeared out of nowhere, it would not be a problem for you to join the army. However, if you wanted to be an official, it would be impossible. This was a hard and fast rule that Yang Chendong had requested. Being an official for 1,000 miles was only for money. This was a rule that had been passed down for thousands of years by the ancestors. There must be a reason for it. Yang Chendong did not want to test people and he did not have the time to do so. Because of this, it was better to take advantage of these people's weaknesses. As long as all the officials had scruples before doing anything, they would not dare to take risks easily. This would greatly reduce the crime rate of the officials. Because of the implementation of this set of policies, the integrity of the officials in the Yang faction had never been a problem. Perhaps there were some mediocre officials who did not do anything, but there was no one who was greedy. This was the result of Yang Chendong making use of family and friendship to make an issue out of it. Speaking of which, the officials who were appointed were all very careful. Not to mention that if they really extended their greedy hands, it would bring bad effects to their loved ones. They might even destroy many people because of their own selfish thoughts. Just speaking of which, as Xianxia continued to grow stronger, their future would also be incomparably bright. At this time, who would be stupid enough to take the initiative to destroy their own future? As for not being discovered when they did something bad? With the existence of Xianxia reporters, if they did something bad, it would immediately be exposed. This was fully proven in other Xianxia provinces. Who knew how many officials who were sent out had fallen into the hands of these reporters? With the example of those seniors, they did not dare to take the slightest bit of risk. As for bribing those Xianxia reporters, forget about it. Those people were not in the same department as them. They were directly in charge of Bugnam of Gojoseon and Yang Chendong. As long as they performed well, they could even become officials in the future. With such a bright future, who would bow their heads for some money? In addition, the Xianxia reporters had a rotation system and a patrolling system. Most of the time, the local officials could not figure out the true identity of the Xianxia reporters in their territory. So how could they bribe them? When you finally managed to bribe one, but that person was transferred away and replaced with a new person, plus the existence of the patrolling reporters, this possibility became infinitely small, and no one dared to try again. The officials did not dare to be greedy. Instead, they wholeheartedly wanted to be good officials. They wanted to achieve political achievements and make decisions for the people. The ones who benefited were naturally the ordinary people, but it also made the rich and powerful suffer. When they raised a large amount of money and fought to befriend the new Xianxia officials, they found that the other party was unexpectedly stubborn. This time, they did not know what to do. Since they could not send money, they had to follow the rules. If they did not give up their rights and interests, they would be punished. As a result, the rich and powerful could only bow their heads and admit defeat, or raise their swords and rebel. But to rely on those rich and powerful people to rebel? Forget it, they were the group of people who were most afraid of death. Perhaps they would dare to bully a good citizen, but to go against the government was still extremely powerful. Especially against the 5-star army that killed without blinking an eye, they did not have the guts to do so. Once the public security was stabilized, the interests of the people were protected, and there was a way out for their livelihood, the third step was to move. That was mass migration. The first to move were those rich and powerful people. As long as these people left their ancestral homes and nests, their influence would be reduced to the lowest, and they would not be a threat to the government. At the very least, the ordinary people could choose to move out, and they would be the representatives of the Han people in various places. As a result, Not only would the Chinese language and culture be spread better, it would also be very beneficial to the people who were willing to move out. For example, if they chose to move out, they would receive more land, more than double the amount of land they would get if they stayed. Just by leaving their homeland, they could receive so many benefits, and it was inevitable that some people would be tempted. When a large number of people were moved out and scattered to the other Xianxia provinces, the nobility of the Han people would gradually be reflected. Think about it, if a place was filled with Han people, how could it show the rise of their status in the world? Only when there were different kinds of ethnic groups would the Han people be able to stand high above the masses. That would be the only way to prove everything. Moving out a portion of the people would also reduce the pressure on Yunnan and Guizhou. With a smaller population, the amount of land they would receive would be more. When the people had money and food, they would have more children, and the new Han people would spread to the other Xianxia provinces. This was like a virtuous cycle, and in the end, the Han people would spread all over the world and become the rulers of any place. Even if there was a day when the descendants of Xianxia did not live up to expectations, the country would still fall into the hands of the Han people. This was enough to make Yang Qindong feel gratified and satisfied. After the three-step policy was formulated, Yao Yingjun led a group of officials and began to get busy. Yang Qindong also did his best to help from the side. For example, with him here, the Xianxia provinces opened their doors to welcome the Han people, and prepared houses, fields, and necessities in advance. If Yao Yingjun were to do these things, who knew how much time it would take to coordinate? Yang Qindong was very busy, and in contrast, Zhou Xiang was very idle. Ever since he came to Yunnan Manor, he first ate a face full of dust before entering the city. When he entered the city and entered the relay station, he cleaned up and wanted to see Bugnam of Gojoseon and Yang Qindong. He had been waiting for an answer. Zhou Xiang was someone that Yang Qindong wanted to meet, but not now. He wanted to wait until the situation in Guangxi was under control. However, Zhou Xiang did not know that. He was trapped in the relay station every day, and did not know anything about the outside world. Right now, he was thinking about how to meet Yang Qindong. In his view, the longer some things were delayed, the more disadvantageous it would be for him. At the very least, if the problem was not solved for a long time, how would the court look at him? How would Emperor Yingzong look at him? Would they say that he was too incompetent? At this moment, he was in the tiger's den, but Zhou Xiang was still thinking about the emperor's opinion of him. He was thinking about his own official career. It had to be said that he was really obsessed with being an official. In fact, Zhou Xiang was just a representative of the Southern Ming Dynasty's civil officials. The Southern Ming Dynasty's civil officials had the same name, but they cared more about benefits. The higher one's position was, the more famous one would be, and the more benefits one could obtain. This made countless people think of ways to climb up the ranks. Sometimes, in order to attract the attention of others or the emperor, they would even do things that would leave others dumbfounded. They did not hesitate to impeach each other. In short, the court was often a mess. If they wanted to do something good, they would have to face all kinds of resistance and trouble. There was a saying in the future, being an official is good, being an official is good, wearing leather shoes and a watch. However, compared to the officials of the Great Ming Dynasty, the difference was still too far. For example, as long as a scholar passed the county examination, it was proof that they had entered a privileged society. They did not have to pay taxes, and they also had the right to not kneel when they saw an official. If they were more powerful and passed the county examination, then they would have the power to own a large amount of land and servants. All kinds of privileges would constantly come to them. Moreover, they did not have to pay taxes to the country. Over time, when the number of people in this group increased, they would own nearly half of the world's wealth with a few people. At that time, it would be easier said than done for the country to become rich and powerful. If they wanted to reform, then they would have to face the attacks of these people. It would be impossible not to fail. Zhou Xiang was one of them. He was one of the people who obtained benefits. However, his heart was bigger than those people. His goal was to continue to climb up. In order to achieve this goal, he had to first meet Yang Qindong. In order to achieve this goal, he first gave money to the Xianxia staff at the relay station. Unfortunately, there were clear rules. These staff did not dare to accept money. Did they not want to live? Bribery was not an option. Zhou Xiang sent people out of the relay station to take the initiative to look for clues about Bugnam of Gojoseon. He wanted to see the real person through his own efforts. However, he had forgotten Ba Daojiang's warning. When the people of the diplomatic mission walked out of the relay station, they were quickly beaten up by the hooligans who looked at them. They walked back with bruises all over their faces. Because of this matter, Zhou Xiang vented his anger on the staff of the relay station. However, the result was that the current Yunnan manor was not peaceful. He had already told them not to go out casually, but they did not listen. Who could they blame? If not even one person could leave, how could they talk about meeting Yang Chendong? Zhou Xiang sighed. He had no choice but to wait bitterly. Zhou Xiang had no choice. He did not know what had happened in Guangxi. However, in Nanjing Manor, the capital of the Southern Ming dynasty, the news had already spread. Because of this, the ministers were stirred up into a pot of porridge. The 5-star army and the 3 provinces army had started a war. When they heard this news, the Southern Ming dynasty still had the mood of watching a good show. In many people's hearts, this was simply a fight between 2 tigers. They only needed to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. If the time was right, they would make a move to seize the benefits that belonged to them.
The development of the matter was as they had expected.
The 3 provinces army was indeed in chaos. What made them feel even more incredulous was that Bugnam of Gojoseon Yang Chendong actually believed the words of the 3 provinces king Zhu Huifu, and only brought 500 people into Yunnan Manor. Chapter 1605. When they received this news, all of the officials in the Southern Ming dynasty sucked in a breath of cold air. While they sighed at Yang Chendong's courage, they also cursed at his stupidity. If it was just a meeting, the hundreds of thousands of soldiers would have chosen to lower their heads. Then, the world would have been at peace, and there would not have been so many wars. After accepting and digesting this news, some officials suggested that they use this opportunity to take down Guangxi. This was because no matter who won or lost, Guangxi would be marginalized due to its geography. This was the best opportunity for the Southern Ming dynasty to make a move. Naturally, Zhu Qizhen also agreed to this. As such, he sent out Zhou Xiang. Sure enough, things went very smoothly. After convincing Bai Kuan, Guangxi once again belonged to the Southern Ming dynasty. Following this, it was time to snatch the fruits. A large number of officials with backgrounds and backing were sent to Guangxi, and the Southern Ming dynasty began to control this region. At the same time, in order to kill Yang Chendong, they also sent a letter to Wang Mubin of Shiping, telling him to find an opportunity to make a move. In short, they wanted to kill Yang Chendong. According to the predictions of the Southern Ming dynasty's officials, Bugnam of Gojoseon was too gullible. This time, he would definitely suffer a big setback and might even be killed. If this was the case, then the Xianxia dynasty would definitely fall into chaos, and the Southern Ming dynasty would take this opportunity to snatch more benefits. There were even some officials who directly cried in the imperial court, praising their ancestors for their blessings. Once Bugnam of Gojoseon died, the Xianxia dynasty would fall into chaos, and the Great Ming dynasty would rise. Once they expanded their strength, they would be able to take down Baiming one day and unify the world. There were even officials who suggested that they should immediately contact the generals of the Xianxia dynasty outside. The Southern Ming dynasty could recognize their identities and recognize them as the rulers of their regions. The only condition was to help them take down Baiming. This way, the Great Ming dynasty would be able to develop as they wished, and the Southern Ming dynasty would not interfere. Zhu Qizhen was clearly interested in the latter suggestion. He asked the ministers to analyze the possibility of success and list out the names of these people for future research. Just as the Southern Ming dynasty was busy, new news came. Bugnam of Gojoseon had won a great victory. Not only did he capture the king of 3 provinces, Zhu Huituan, alive, he even captured the king of Shiping, Mu Bin, who wanted to fish in troubled waters. This was like a bolt from the blue that struck the Southern Ming dynasty's imperial court, making everyone unable to believe that all this was true. Didn't the news say that Bugnam of Gojoseon only brought 500 people into Southern Cloud Prefecture? In the Southern Cloud Manor, Zhu Huihua had an army of tens of thousands. How could he lose against 500 people in his own territory? Unable to digest this result, Zhu Qizhen questioned loudly in the imperial court. Could it be that Yang Chendong is immortal? You still can't kill him? In the face of the emperor's anger and questioning,
The officials all bowed their heads.
No one could answer, no one could explain, because this was something they couldn't figure out in their hearts. Fortunately, someone in the Imperial court immediately opened his mouth and raised another question. Once Bugnam of Gojoseon dealt with Zhu Huihua and Mu Bin. Wouldn't that be equivalent to settling Yunnan and Guizhou? Wouldn't that mean that he was going to fight for Guangxi next? After all, Yang Chendong was willing to take the risk to enter Southern Cloud Prefecture because of the peace of the three provinces. At that time, the Beiming Imperial court knew about this matter, but it didn't happen. This could also be regarded as tacit consent.
Now that the other party had the upper hand, he naturally had the right to take everything that he should have.
After the new question was thrown out, Zhu Qizhen, who was sitting on the Golden Dragon throne, had a big change in his expression. If this was the case, then the situation was too unfavorable for him. The Great Ming Empire was already divided into the north and south, and its strength was no longer the same as before. If they really lost the three provinces, how would the Southern Ming Empire survive? More importantly, there would be no barrier between them and the five-star army in the future. If one day, the other party had evil intentions, wouldn't they be able to attack whenever they wanted? Thinking of this, Zhu Qizhen suddenly stood up from the Golden Dragon throne and shouted, "No, we definitely can't let the five-star army occupy the three provinces and threaten the foundation of our Southern Ming Empire." The emperor's big change scared the officials at first, but then they thought that if such a situation really happened, they wouldn't have good days as officials. At that moment, they reacted one by one and hurriedly agreed. Their attitudes were quickly unified. After their thoughts were unified, they began to discuss the next step. This led to the matter of Zhou Ziong going to Southern Cloud Prefecture. After all, he was at the front lines and was very familiar with the situation there. This was already a court meeting a month ago. This time, all the officials gathered in the throne room to talk about the matter at hand. That was, there had already been an urgent report sent from 800 li away. The five-star army had indeed sent out troops, and they had come from Yunnan to Guangxi in a rather unyielding manner. They had used force to blast open the gates of Sea City, and even the newly appointed magistrate Wang Bang had died in battle. When the news came, it was like a large dark cloud hanging over the heads of all the officials, causing their expressions to become quite unsightly. After receiving the news last night, Zhu Qizhen practically didn't sleep for the entire night. At this moment, his spirit seemed to be somewhat dispirited. Sitting on the Golden Dragon throne, his eyes were somewhat red as he asked below. Sea City has been lost.
This matter should already be known by all my beloved officials.
Next, let's talk about the countermeasures. After saying this, Zhu Qizhen leaned his body against the Golden Dragon throne, looking very haggard. As an emperor, Zhu Qizhen's luck wasn't too good. When he first became the emperor, the Great Ming dynasty had just experienced the golden age of Ren Xuanji's rule. Whether it was in terms of military or economic strength, the Great Ming dynasty was strong. At that time, as the emperor, when he spoke, hundreds of officials would agree. How awe-inspiring was that? But all of this was blown away by the wind with the changes in the Tumu fortress. A great defeat in military history dealt a heavy blow to the Great Ming dynasty's foundation. This young emperor had no choice but to move from the northern capital to the southern capital and establish himself as the emperor of the Southern Ming dynasty. Even so, Zhu Qizhen still didn't admit defeat. He still wanted to work hard and one day fight back, unify the Great Ming dynasty, and return to glory. At that time, he was very grateful to Yang Chendong. If not for this person, he would have become Yeshen's captive in the Tumu fortress. He might even have lost his life. So at that time, he really treated this descendant of the Yang clan as an important official. But who would have thought that Yang Chendong was more than just an ordinary person? After leaving him, he first returned to Beiming and helped Dai Zong, Zhu Qiyu, fight a beautiful battle to defend the capital and expel Yes Hen. After that, he came down south at Zhu Qizhen's request. After that, he established his own faction. Now, it had developed into a faction that wasn't inferior to the Southern Ming dynasty. In Zhu Qizhen's eyes, Yang Chendong's Xianxia was only a faction that wasn't inferior to the Southern Ming dynasty. It wasn't that he didn't want to look at all of this, but that the officials below him didn't tell him the truth. Or perhaps, those officials didn't know what the Far East was? What was the Ras Duchy? In their eyes, a Mongol tribe like Yes Hen was already an incredible existence. As the saying goes, The ignorant are fearless. If one didn't understand deeply enough, they wouldn't be able to understand the strength of their opponent. But now, after the 5-star army took down Yunnan and Guizhou, they sent troops to Guangxi. They even dared to openly oppose the southern Ming dynasty. Only then did Zhu Qizhen feel the pressure.
He clearly understood that the appetite of this bug-nom of Gojosian that he personally conferred was huge.
The ass decides the head. Since he was the emperor of the southern Ming dynasty, he definitely wouldn't allow anyone to threaten him. This time, he gathered all of the officials so that they could come up with a plan for him. Most of the officials had already received the news last night. Even if they received the news a little slower, they still knew the whole story before the morning court. Other than cursing Yang Chundong's audacity in their hearts, they were also thinking of a way to solve the problem. However, the actions of the 5-star army were truly unexpected. How could it be solved so easily? Now that the emperor asked this question, the officials couldn't think of a good way to deal with it. They could only shut their mouths. After all, this wasn't the time to fight for credit. If they said something wrong, they would incur the emperor's wrath. When the emperor asked for a plan, all of the officials became mute. Zhu Qizhen was naturally displeased. He slowly straightened his body and his face was even uglier than before. What's wrong? You all usually consider yourselves as virtuous officials, comparing yourselves to Guanzhong and Yu Yi. Now that I need you all, why aren't you speaking? Facing the emperor's question, the officials lowered their heads even more. They all tucked their tails between their legs and acted as if they were invisible. When Zhu Qizhen saw the reactions of the officials, he was very disappointed. If possible, he really wanted to replace all of these ministers. However, if he really did that, he was afraid that the political power of the southern Ming dynasty would really be unstable. After all, the great Ming dynasty emphasized that the emperor and the scholar officials ruled the country together. Zhu Qizhen took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed the anger in his heart. He decided to call them out. Since no one took the initiative to answer, he could only ask them one by one and force them to think of a solution. Since it was the emperor who asked, he naturally wouldn't choose those insignificant officials. Zhu Qizhen's gaze looked at the people standing at the front of the hall. The first person he called out was the Minister of War, Kuang Yi. After all, this involved war and the Ministry of War had a lot of say. Beloved official Kuang, what do you think of this matter? How should we solve it? Kuang Yi wasn't young and could boast of being one of the old officials. For the sake of the stability of the southern Ming dynasty, he had racked his brains and exhausted his body and mind. He had visited almost all of the southern Ming dynasty's military stations at least once. He had even visited some places several times. He was definitely worthy of this title. You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.